You wake before the cock rehearses. The room keeps a tidy Breton cold. Your breath lifts in a faint cloud, quick to vanish. The blanket smells of wool and last week's smoke. Ash in the hearth glows like old cherries under gray. You sit up, listen, beam, latch, the small tick of settling embers, and rub your hands until prickles wake your fingers. Linen goes on first, then the heavier layer that remembers weather. You lace your shoes by feel and smile at the stubborn leather. The door latch agrees to work. You step into a lane that has not chosen morning. Dew beads along foxgloves and barley heads, each drop a paused thought. Somewhere a dog decides against barking. Your steps sound honest on the packed earth. The air tastes of iron and green. It slides into your chest and widens it. Up ahead, others move without fuss. Quiet shapes with bundles of brushwood and poles. Tonight the bonfire will do its long work, and the village will keep it company, as people do when light and waiting belong together. You know the path in this patient dark, the shallow rut where a cart misjudged the bend, the stone that enjoys tripping the proud, nettles that stand guard with stinging manners. Overhead, a thin moon minds its distance while a pale seam of cloud drifts like teased wool. A neighbor clears his throat, universal warning for root underfoot, and you ease a step wider. No one hurries. Politeness is measured by not startling each other. The hill's edge appears as a thicker shadow, the breeze now carrying salt. On the common, the pyre already has a shape cone, deliberate, a promise rather than a boast. Hop poles and straight firs are stacked to draw, not gulp, air. Buckets squat at good intervals, patient punctuation. Two elders stand windward, sniffing like weather vanes, agreeing by nods where nothing needed saying. Someone braids straw along the upwind side to discourage sparks from finding mischief. You set down your gorse briskly, superior, and stretch your back until something small pops and feels better. Music tests its first sentences. A binioù piping a thin line of sound. A bombarde replying with reed, rough warmth that feels like mittens for the ears. It isn't celebration yet, only clearing the throat of the night. A jar of cider moves hand to hand, breath fogging above it like a modest blessing. You crouch at the sheltered side, where thin kindling waits. The clay brazier arrives from the chapel hearth, coal inside glowing with the calm of a job to do. You hold your hands near and feel its promise. The coaxing begins, unshowy as most useful things. Shavings, then needles, then twigs. 2 measured breaths, a third you didn't plan. A thread of flame slips from the coal and searches forward. You shelter it with a palm, not to own it, only to keep the breeze from offering advice. Bark gives up its cold, resin loosens, and the smell turns from damp wood to kitchen memory. The flame becomes a polite hand, then 2 hands, and shoulders around you settle by a finger's width. You feed the fire until it no longer requires your opinion. Others add thicker sticks in careful triangles. Someone lays a short ladder of faggots to teach the draft its manners. The cone answers with a crackle that doesn't throw its weight around. Sparks rise like thoughtful bees and go out because the sky is sensible. Across the rim, a girl sets her scarf straight and laughs at a joke too small for export. A dog circles twice and lies down with the sigh of a professional beginning work. You take your place at the circle's edge, close enough for shins to feel promised heat. Not so close your cuffs grow bold. Warmth arrives like a letter read aloud. First to the face, then to the wrists, then into the small joints that think they are older than you. The musicians knit a slow and drow, a step that moves more by patience than distance. Feet scuff dust. No one bothers the melody with cleverness. The tune is a path, not a performance. The wind minds the thatch and keeps its manners. Someone passes you a buckwheat galette folded like a pocket, warm and simple. You don't rush. Eating is part of the watch, a way to mark time that doesn't need a bell. The cider tastes like last autumn under glass. You study the fire's temper as you would a neighbor's learning. When it likes more, when it likes less, how it sits when content. Quiet talk begins, narrow as a lane. Who brought what wood? Whose hedge needs trimming? Whether the sea smelled different at dusk. The night accepts these topics. A blessing moves the circle, typical as dew. A woman scratches a small cross into ash at the base. A man who doesn't say blessings nods anyway because ash is good at many jobs, and superstition is rarely expensive. You pocket a short charred stick to seed your home hearth. It makes no boast, only gentle responsibility. You glance at the buckets, the pale line of sea, the hedges where the dark lingers, ordinary and satisfying, because everyone has come to be ordinary together. You let your breathing and the fire's breathing match. It is easy to keep watch when the task asks little and gives much heat for the skin, work for the hands, a rhythm for the feet, a reason to stand beside neighbors without many words. You mark the breeze, mind the sparks, and lend the night your steadiness. The bonfire lifts itself higher by degrees, not by leaps, and the village meets it with patience. You will be here until light decides it has waited long enough. You follow 3 others down the lane, with a rope coiled over one shoulder, and a small billhook riding your belt. Behind you, the bonfire keeps a low conversation with the night, but you step away to where fields end and scrub begins, where brushwood accumulates like quiet plans. The hedgebank accepts you without fuss. Dry wood is the goal, not heroics. You look for last year's twigs, still held off the ground by new growth, little bone fingers that forgot to fall. Gorse offers itself with grudging generosity. You thank it with gloves. Each sprig answers with a small crackle when bent, the right kind of music. Willow near the ditch keeps its humor even when cut, springy and light. You give each length a sharp shake to fling away water and hear whether the center kept its summer. Hazel supplies straight rods that behave. You share the lane's width without needing to discuss it. One neighbor walks the ditch edge, nimble as a heron. Another prefers bramble margins and accepts the scratches like tidy signatures of the work. The third picks low, rescuing what others miss, and somehow building the best bundle in the end. You learn again that the art lies in not arguing with wood. Each piece announces what it wants to be, kindling or filler, brace or roof of the cone. You listen and agree. Sticks dislike debate. The hedgerow smells of sweetness that refuses explanation. Wind slides along the gorse with a hint of warm bread that will not boast. You pause, breathe once, and return to trimming. A beetle climbs your knuckle, decides you are a hill too difficult to farm, and chooses another path. Dew beads on young willow like tiny bells. You shake a switch, and the bells turn into cold freckles on your cuffs. A cart track crosses the bend where the strips give way to pasture. Ruts hold narrow mirrors of a bruised sky. You step where grass remembers to be firm. You return to cutting because even on nights when everyone gathers, wood prefers hands that do not hurry and voices that do not boast. You measure each bundle by the rope, not your back. Stack short to long, twigs inside, lengths outside, ends one way so they behave. Tuck 2 thin wands across the belly to keep the eager ones honest. The knot your fingers tie is older than your memory of learning it. When you pull the loop tight, the bundle settles with the tidy satisfaction of a well-told story. You lift, decide it is almost, but not quite too heavy, and call that perfect. Words are few. They arrive only when necessary. Mind the ditch. That one's green. Leave the thorn. The lane provides its own music, the billhook's cough, rope sliding over bark, the soft rain of shaken dew. On the hill, 2 lights appear, then 2 more. The village is feeding the cone, and the fire tells them what it prefers, with a voice that rises and settles. A fallen limb waits, wedged between hawthorn legs. It pretends to be stubborn. You pretend to be impressed. You lever with the hook, ease it loose, and feel the quiet reward of persuading matter with patience. The wood is half sound, good for an outer ring where it will catch and convert rather than sulk and smoke. You trim the sullen tips and lay the length along your bundle like a sleepy dog. The thorns offer one last opinion on your sleeve. The cloth practices diplomacy and keeps its dignity. On the way back, you take the higher path that keeps your boots mostly innocent. The bundle rides your shoulder. The rope hums against your coat in the small rhythm of walking. Where the hedgebank dips, the common shows itself a dim bowl with a bright spoon in the middle. People move like punctuation around the fire's long sentence. Music loosens into something everyone knows without thinking. At the pyre, you loosen the knot and let the bundle decide how it will sit. Others do the same. A quiet choreography appears, no one commanding, no one confused. The cone takes the new wood without complaint. You tuck willow where the draft likes to breathe, hazel where manners are required, and gorse where edges enjoy making a point. A man who used to be shorter than your coat cuffs nods at your placement with the rare approval of someone who mostly approves in silence. You answer with the same currency. Back to the hedges, because the night is long and comfort is a trade between flame and hands. There is a mild satisfaction in the loop. Away to gather, back to warm, away again. The moon minds you with an ant's patience. A scarf of cloud slides over, then off. You trim more willow. You stack more hazel. You take stubborn gorse that is determined to remain an argument and make it into a citizen. The path grows familiar in the dark, as if the ground expected your feet. When bundles become a row at your feet, you choose the best and leave the others for hands that may arrive later. The night makes everyone equal in this. Faces become the same idea near a fire. You carry, you place, you carry, you place work that doesn't demand victory, only steadiness. Shoulders warm, and forget to complain. Palms learn where the rope lies best. The billhook rides at your belt like a polite dog, present and dependable. The hill glows and you feel included without explaining. You finish the last small collection for now and stand at the edge of the common, letting the heat draw a line across your shins. Your hands show sap stain, one respectful scratch, and a new shine from the rope. The fire takes a louder breath and then returns to its measured voice. Musicians rest their lips. The hedges will still be there an hour from now. The ditch will still hold its narrow sky. The night repeats without apology. You return to the circle with the light feeling of something done correctly, not perfectly. Your bundle joins the others, part of a conversation between hedge and flame that will continue until dawn suggests breakfast. You take your place near the quiet line of buckets. Accept a folded galette from a hand you recognize by weight alone, and resume the watch as if watching were a craft that no one owns and everyone shares. The brushwood waits in neat shadows to become warmth, and you agree to the terms. You stand with the elders at the gentle crest, where the common tips toward the hedges and the hedges tip toward the sea. The wind has opinions, as usual. It arrives from the saltward side, thinks about turning, and then remembers itself. A fingertip dampened on the tongue tells the same story the smoke tells. Tonight, the breath of the sea will keep to its lane. You like this test, primitive as a sparrow, and just as reliable. A man with wrists like old rope holds a tuft of sheep's wool, looses it, and watches it drift where roofs are not. The hill is not chosen for majesty. It is chosen for manners. A good sight lets the smoke carry away from thatch, lets sparks exhaust themselves over pasture, and lets people gather without stumbling over one another's feet. You walk the rim with them, heel to toe, feeling the firmness under grass, the give near rabbit scrapes, the places that remember cartwheels. You mark where cows have made their case against merriment, and you suggest a path that avoids their reasoning. The elders agree by not disagreeing. One elder squats, dips fingers into the topsoil, and rolls the dark earth as if reading a palm. It's damp enough to keep a stray ember modest, not so wet the fire will sulk. He pinches a blade of grass and lets it fall. The blade hesitates, then presses itself gently downwind, pointing toward the low meadow and away from cottages. A second elder mutters that this wind likes to flirt with the brook and ignore responsibility. Everyone nods like people who have raised the same child. You smile because the breeze arranges your hair into a style no one requested. You pace the distance from the nearest thatch, count paces without announcing the number, because numbers are good servants and noisy masters. The rule is the same every year. Farther than comfort, nearer than foolishness. The buckets stand in their places like small moonlit stones, and you trace their circle wider by a step. Sand sacks lie slack but ready. A boy brings a shovel, taller than himself, and plants it where someone will remember it in the half-light. You shift it anyway, because someone always forgets. The slope shoulder offers a lee side, where flame can wake without stuttering. You test the ground with a boot heel. The crust holds, the subsoil doesn't complain. Where the rabbits tunneled, you prod gently, then tamp. You scatter a thin lace of damp earth along the upwind edge, as if drawing a boundary the wind will politely respect. Old habits feel like wisdom, and perform as such often enough to deserve patience. The hedge bank at the field's margin provides a natural backstop. You note the gap where bramble broke, and decide to mend it after dawn. A careful conversation begins about the cone's height. Too low, and it will mutter all night without offering warmth. Too tall, and it will throw its bragging into people's faces. Someone measures with a staff and his eye. Someone else measures with memory, which is sharper when the night is cold. You compromise with a simple truth. Wood will tell you where it wants to be if you stop telling it where you prefer. The base expands by 2 strides. The tip remains a modest ambition rather than a boast. The wind approves by staying steady. Smoke's first rehearsal rises from the kindling trial, a small tray of twigs near the chosen center. You and an elder crouch and coax a miniature bonfire, meant only to teach drafts their roots. It burns like a secret that intends to remain one. The column leans away from the cottages, threads itself above the pasture, and thins toward the brook. You watch for eddies that could tumble embers into mischief. None present themselves, though the night keeps plenty of pockets for surprises. You make a mental note, as if notes help the wind remember its responsibilities. You walk the imagined ring where dancers will trace their slow steps. The ground there is nothing more than ground grass a bit flattened, a few stubborn stones pretending they own the place. You kneel, nudge 2 of them into the pocket of your hand, and heave them a few spans away. No proclamations, just the small work that saves ankles and pride. A mother with a sleeping child on her shoulder thanks you without speaking. The child sleeps on, deciding the wind is calm enough to ignore. Thatch glows faintly in the distance like contented animals. A foxbark folds itself into the hedges. The sea breathes in and out, the patient ant who knows more than she cares to say. You taste salt. The fire behind you persuades damp wood to remember summer. The elders confer in their lean vocabulary, chin tilts, eyebrow shrugs, the kind of language that never gets written but always says enough. Finally, a thumb upwind, a palm flat downwind, an open hand toward the meadow. This is the diagram the night understands. You help lay a corridor of nothing between pyre and people, a deliberate absence that will keep wool and skirts from tasting sparks. It's marked in the simplest currency, a woven line of flattened grass, and the knowledge everyone shares. A girl ties a rag to a stake to catch any change in the breeze. It flutters like a small bird tethered to a lesson. You reposition 2 buckets because they liked each other too much. Space is a kind of kindness when water has to travel in a hurry. Someone suggests moving the hay cart farther down the slope, not because panic is fashionable, but because laziness is expensive in the dark. 2 of you roll the cart until the wheels remember smoothness. It settles near the hedge bank with a dignified grunt. A third carries the pitchfork to where it will be found without a search party. The wind nudges your back as if to say that cooperation is amusing and perhaps admirable. You resist the temptation to explain to the wind that people invented buckets because of wind. The musicians wander over and test a few notes where the ring will be. Their sound drifts downwind as a friendly scout. Smoke follows obligingly. You watch the flag of rag again, still steady. You spit onto your fingertip, hold it up, and confirm that your mouth remembers how to do what grandfathers did without thinking. The village gathers at the circle's rim, and the elders release the night into its pattern with the extravagant gesture of doing nothing more. You set a small stone at your toe to mark your place, a private ritual fencing your patience into a shape you can stand in. Now you look once more along the line of roofs, then along the pasture, then at the slow ribbon of brook that will carry any rash ember to the kind of wet boredom embers hate. You feel that quiet sense of rightness that arrives when a thing has been thought through and given good manners. The hill does not need grandeur. It needs obedience to wind and kindness to thatch and a path for feet that want to be steady. You find your place in the ring again and let the bonfire tell you, in its calm grammar, that the choice was sound. You return to the pile the way you return to a line you like slowly, with the belief that meaning improves when arranged with care. The cone is familiar but new, a round base firm, a hollow down the middle for breath, and a scattered skirt of twigs like hair waiting to be combed. You stand to windward, where smoke will keep its manners, and lay your palm above the hollow. The air moves through it like a quiet animal finding its burrow. Courtesy, not force, governs the building. You kneel and begin a lattice 2 lengths down, 2 across tidy as the first strokes of a basket. The little chimneys this makes will carry the fire's thoughts upward instead of sulking along the ground. Seasoned oak anchors the lower courses. It lends the old heat it knows how to hold. Straighter hazel sits above, obedient in all weather. Each stick goes down with the softness used to smooth a child's blanket, firm enough to stay, gentle enough not to scold the grain. Green wood has its job and wears it openly. You fetch fresh fir boughs and lay them in thin skirts where you would like smoke to linger. Smoke is not only spectacle, it keeps midges humble and makes the night smell like clean thought. Gorse tucks in at the edges because it snaps to attention when asked. Nothing is wasted. A crooked length that would not flatter a roof becomes a brace. A knotted piece becomes the polite wedge that keeps a gap honest. A neighbor drags a swollen limb that seems too proud of itself. You pare it down to sense. Take 2 sound lengths from its middle and use them to frame a small doorway near the core. This is the mouth, where the ember will enter later. You think like a draftsman without charcoal. A path for air, a floor for coals, a roof that will not panic at its own shadow. The clay brazier rests by your heel, certain of purpose without making a speech about it. You rise and walk the circle to see what the wind recommends. The rag on the stake still points toward the pasture. Good. You lay a ring of willow, springy and dutiful, to tie the outer skirt to the inner spine. Without speaking, hands nearby resume the quiet mathematics of length and angle. A longer pole arrives at your shoulder. A shorter one learns to fill a sulky gap. The cone climbs by inches, which is the right speed for anything that plans to last past midnight. Under your hands, the structure gains manners. The center well deepens. You drop a palmful of shavings and hear the faintest whisper as they settle, like sand deciding to be quiet. 3 slender sticks stand upright in that well, a tripod as plain as bread. It looks small now. Later, when coals gather, the little chimney will tell shy flames that up is available. A boy appears with broom twigs and a face ready for importance. You show him where the crisp ends prop a narrow tunnel. He places them perfectly and stands taller by a thumb's width. You choose a heavier length sweet chestnut that believes in its own future. It belongs not at the center, which answers to nimble things, but along the shoulder where weight lends comfort. 2 of you lay it together and step back. The cone is not tall, only confident. Fire dislikes arrogance as much as people do. You work outward again, checking that each addition still leaves hand-wide channels for breath. You feel the drafts with your palm, small, deliberate threads of evening moving through the ribs. At your feet lies a confusion of twigs that would be untidy if you did not enjoy their willingness. You braid them into a loose mat and slide it under the skirt on the lee side, where dampness pretends it has rights. The mat lifts the hem just enough to keep sulks from taking hold. Tiny sawdust kisses your sleeves. The smell rises resin, leaf, a clean bite of sap, as if a small forest has come to remind you that time passes and does not mind you. Someone asks for the buckets to be shifted 1 pace farther, and you oblige, because water is a traveler that dislikes crowds. Now the green boughs again. You feather them inward where the cone will want to snatch at air and end its patience too quickly. Fresh needles lend a cool color to the rim and promise a calm smoke that will drift toward pasture, persuading the sheep that the village is thinking kindly of them. You step back to look. The cone reads like a simple answer to a long question. It asks for 1 more ring, thin and tidy. You oblige, laying slender rods until all of it reads as a single sentence written in wood. You check the doorway and run your palm along its lintel, as if greeting a neighbor. The ember, when it comes, will enter there like a guest that prefers no fuss. A tuft of dry moss sits just inside, not as tinder, but as a promise to the promise. The broom twig boy returns with pine cones clutched like trophies. You thank him gravely and hide 3 where they will be rewarded later without encouraging mischief. Belief is a useful warmth, while 1 is short of fire. By now, each person has a small province of the cone to tend, and the structure has that felt quality of a thing about to begin. You make 1 last circuit, checking for eager ends that jut where skirts will twirl, for careless gaps wide enough to inhale a foot, for any length that might roll when heat gives it new ideas. Small corrections satisfy more than big ones. A nudge here, a twist there, a little willow persuading a sulky birch. The whole breathes lightly. You feel it through your sleeves. A shallow breathing you can almost see. The wind keeps sending its steady letter to the meadow. The rag nods. You brush your palms, lift your glove from the grass, and meet the eyes of a woman across the ring who has been making the same decisions from her side. She nods the way people nod when they have both spelled the same word correctly from opposite ends. The cone stands uncomplicated and ready. When the ember arrives, the air will know where to go. The green will restrain the red without scolding it. The seasoned wood will absorb heat like old stories absorb attention. You stand with open hands, palms warming like shallow bowls left out for a kind rain. Around the cone, the circle draws in by instinct, not by order boots easing closer. Shawls settling, musicians lowering reeds to their hips. A woman steps forward with a clay dish of ash saved from last year's hearth. She says nothing. The dish speaks well enough. She kneels at the windward base and with 2 fingers traces a small cross in the ash, quick and plain, like tying a knot you could manage with your eyes shut. The line holds. Nobody applauds. The fire to be understands its manners. The dish moves hand to hand, as ordinary as bread. Each person finds a use for its dust thumbprints on cuffs, a crescent along a bucket's rim, a gray smudge beneath a belt's tongue. None of it is declaration. All of it is agreement. You rub a little circle over the knuckle the rope prefers, and feel the cool grit settle into the small lines of your skin. Chapel words wait for chapel. Tonight the words are field words and gate words, the kind that keep sheep where fences forget. Keep the spark small, keep the cattle sound, keep the wind polite. Nobody says them all. Together they get said. A clay brazier arrives and is set on 3 stones so the earth will share the job. Inside, a coal glows with that quiet certainty heat keeps. When time is on its side, 2 curls of birch bark and a twist of straw lie beside it like tidy promises. You crouch with 2 others and make a small roof of shoulders. The woman tips a pinch of ash onto the straw, as if seasoning a pot. Someone flicks a grain of salt from a pocket, because thrift and superstition often travel together. You lift a birch curl papery and slightly sticky and set the coal on its back. White spreads from the center outward like milk chasing the rim of a bowl. The bark sighs sweet, faint, a cupboard that remembers honey. You fold the straw into a cradle and offer it to the glow. 3 breaths from the side, never straight on. Fire dislikes being told what to do. Straw turns from gold to fox to light. 2 thin twigs go down crosswise, a small lesson in corners. A sliver of resinous pine follows, and the little tongue of orange receives it gratefully. All around, everyone pretends not to watch while watching with both eyes. A heel nudged over a stone, a shawl corrected, a bucket edged 1 pace farther from bravado. Murmurs begin, softer than feet on grass. Bless the path the air will walk. Bless the hands that will lift water. Bless the feet that will find the stones and step between them. Bless the old ones who taught caution, and the young ones who make caution necessary. Your own voice joins without asking you first, plain as bread. The woman touches your wrist with the dish's rim. An ash crescent remains, cool as morning. You do not know what it means, and do not need to. Meaning tonight is a committee job. You slide the living nest to the doorway cut at the base of the cone. The hollow you built breathes in, a small creature waking. Draft takes the gift and carries it upward, showing a guest around a familiar room. Shavings catch with the sound of dry peas poured into a wooden bowl. A spark climbs, reconsiders, and returns to work with better manners. You and the 2 beside you share 1 held breath, then let it go. The flame is not yours. You are only the person who introduced it to air and asked them to be kind. Around the ring, people step back by the width of a thought. Someone makes the sign of the cross as absent-mindedly as scratching an itch. Someone checks the rag again and approves of its politics. A man who says charms are for soft minds taps the brazier with 2 fingers, as if steadying it. A girl drops a shred of dried fern into the doorway and startles at its cheerful crackle. You tip your chin toward the neat line of buckets, the plainest ritual of all. The cone answers with a deeper breathing, a tone that says, it will work all night without gossip. This is the part worth admiring. Old words and careful hands meet exactly halfway. Nothing asks fire to become less fire. Everything asks people to become more people. The little ash marks turn into a map readable even in half-light water waits here. Wind may pass there. Dancers step here. Dogs mind their intentions. Warmth reaches your shins, not as a shove, but as an invitation. The brazier retires to the side with the dignity of an aunt who has laid the table and now prefers to watch. The woman blows the last dust from the dish and hides it under a bucket slip as if saving crusts for tomorrow. You sweep your gaze along the ridge of roofs. No doorway holds a silhouette assembled entirely from worry. The wind keeps its manners. The pipes try a phrase and tuck it away like a sweet kept for later. The night settles back into its patient shape. You brush ash from your palm onto your boot heel and call it tidiness. The kindling no longer needs your opinion. You step to the ring, lower your shoulders, and give the hours your steadiness, the way a rope lends a bell its voice by not competing with it. Heat rises in slow, sensible sheets. Sparks climb a little, and then remember to be modest. You meet the eyes of a neighbor across the glow, and trade the nod of people who have finished the first small duty of a long night, and are content to stand still for the next one. The blessing is finished. The work goes on. You crouch beside the small clay brazier that waits like a quiet captain at the edge of the ring. Its round belly holds heat the way a good story holds attention calmly, without raising its voice. A lid with 3 finger-wide vent holes rests a little askew. Breath needs a door. Inside, charcoal the size of walnuts sits half-buried in ash, so their pride won't burn out too quickly. When you lift the lid, a gauzy red shows through as if someone drew light with a dull crayon. The pot smells of terracotta and old smoke. Its rim feels warm enough to insist, cool enough to forgive. You remember the short procession from earlier, as if it is still happening because the night has room for more than one moment at a time. From the chapel hearth, the coal came bundled in straw, tucked into a traveling nest of ash and bark curls, carried in slow hands along the lane that prefers quiet feet. The pot thumped a steady beat against a hip with every step, not a drum, just a reminder to keep the pace sensible. Children walked behind, not for spectacle, but because small legs enjoy important errands. You took a turn at the handle, so you know how its heat persuades rather than argues. Now the pot makes a small home beside the buckets, a counterweight to bravado. You fold a square of damp cloth and lay it under the brazier's 3 stones, so the earth does not char in surprise. The cloth sighs and approves. With iron tongs, you nudge the top coal until it rolls and shows a brighter wound of orange. The coal does not flare. It remembers that its job is to last. You sprinkle a pinch of ash from the dish the woman hid mineral snow that calms the surface into an even glow. The ember becomes modest again. A heart that keeps the village on time without asking to be named. A boy arrives with bark curls he has been hoarding like treasure. He asks if the ember is hungry. You tell him embers are always hungry, but become foolish if overfed. Together you place 2 curls on the rim to toast, not ignite. They soften, release a clean sweetness, and wait. When they are flexible, you tuck them at the coal's shoulder, so the ember feels praised without being tempted to strut. The boy nods solemnly and sits with the authority of someone guarding a king who prefers to be left alone. The brazier has a language of small comforts. A sliver of resinous pine set near the vent keeps the air tasting cheerful. A twist of straw offered edgewise sharpens the coal's attention and then is removed before it becomes an opinion. You turn the lid a finger's width to change the draft. The pot answers with a deeper hum you can feel through your knee. Fire in this size suits the night, enough to wake larger things, not enough to argue with wind or men. People come and go, each for a private reason that is still part of the common task. A woman warms a short brand and studies its tip to see whether it wants to take fire for the walk home after dawn. A man touches a ferrule of his staff to the rim, not for luck he claims, but because iron appreciates company. A girl peers at the vent holes and counts, satisfied that 3 is still 3. You say nothing. You keep the coal arranged like a small house. Floor of ash, bed of charcoal, blanket of restraint, doorway of air. When the fire at the cone briefly dips because even confident things have quiet moments, you lift the lid, ease a live chip with the tongs, and carry it to the doorway you cut earlier. The chip rides like a polite guest on a spoon. At the threshold it finds cousins and brightens, and the cone releases a soft, pleased sound like someone who has remembered where the cup was set down. You return to the pot and replace the lid's angle. The ember has not diminished. Sharing is how it keeps itself whole. A neighbor with a voice like weather asks whether flint and steel might have done the job as well. You shrug the kind of shrug that means yes and also no. Sparks from stone arrive like visitors who require coaxing and compliments. This ember comes from a hearth that has been awake since morning, carrying the day's ordinary courage into the night. It is not holier, only more familiar. The pot's clay is crazed with fine lines from many such nights. Your thumb follows one, a riverbed baked into usefulness. Someone brings a little bucket of sieved ash, pale as skimmed milk. You trade ash for thanks and sift a thin veil over the top layer of coals until the glow rests, unstartled. Ash keeps heat the way quilts keep sleep, by allowing breathing, not by smothering. You lift the pot's handle to test weight. It answers that it could be carried across the lane if asked. Not yet. The night is young and likes to pretend otherwise. You set the pot back on its stones, and the damp cloth breathes out another calm. Every so often, a curious child drifts close. You show them how to hold breath to one side of the vent so the ember feels encouraged but not bullied. You let them see the thin seam of red that runs through the charcoal, like a seam in a loaf. Then you send them to watch the buckets, which is the honorable post for anyone whose knees know how to bend quickly. Tasks grow people even when tasks are quiet. Music wanders over a phrase of binioù, a patient reply from bombarde, and then wanders off like kin checking whether you need anything. The brazier approves of music. It keeps its own slow rhythm. When a gust presses its hand against the meadow, the rag flutters and settles, and you turn the lid a sliver more, not because you fear, but because prudence is easier than repair. The pot's breath steadies again. The boy who guards it does not look away, and that is how night work succeeds. Closer to midnight, you inventory the small kingdom in your circle. Tongs, bark curls, 2 clean twigs, a nest of straw that will not be entirely used, a square of cloth, darkening politely, the ash dish retired under a bucket's lip, and the pot ordinary red clay that has become, for a few hours, the throat of the village. You add a handful of tiny charcoal from a pouch, each piece light as a dry bean, scattering them where the glow will adopt them without complaint. A faint aroma of pine and biscuit lifts. Someone across the ring looks up and smiles at a thing they cannot name. When the cone sighs into its long, even breathing again, you rest your hands on your knees and let your own breath match it. The ember in the pot keeps time, not like a bell too grand, but like the pulse you forget you have until you climb a hill and remember. You place the lid squarely and leave it, vents aligned, the coal certain of its job. The brazier does not ask for attention now. It simply keeps the small, stubborn center that will at dawn wake sticks into brands for home hearths, light the griddle for leftover batter, and convince the morning that continuity is a warmth of its own. You crouch at the cone's lee side, where the doorway you framed keeps its small promise. Your knees find the grass that earlier gave up its due, cool now and pressed into an oval the size of patience. Inside, the ember has taken its chair, a steady coal resting against thin curls of bark that exhale sweetness. You hold your hand above the hollow and feel a faint river of air slide under your palm, an invisible thread willing to be guided rather than commanded. You begin with the smallest favors, a pinch of shavings, the kind that fall from a knife when a stick admits it wants to be thinner. You loosen them so they remember to be separate, then let them settle like shy birds along a low branch. Beside them, you arrange 2 twigs the width of your little finger, then 2 across, a small gate that persuades heat to look upward. 2 soft breaths from the side color the curls. They catch with a quiet, businesslike glow. It would be easy to hurry here, to insist that fire should be grateful for attention. You choose not to. Patience tastes better on the second mouthful. You add a 3rd twig with the care used to place a plate for a guest you secretly like. A narrow flame lifts, hesitates as if unsure about its reputation, and then accepts its place. It does not leap. It learns. You shade it with your hand, so the wind becomes suggestion rather than critique. In the hollow, tiny shadows rehearse, and then forget themselves. A neighbor kneels opposite, mirroring your economy. Between you, the doorway becomes a little mouth that eats small things and grows modestly. He passes you a wand of willow peeled of its bark. It looks like bone and acts like a cousin to air. You set it lengthwise with space for breath to walk around it. A new hum appears deeper than a whisper, the draft finding its tune in the lattice you built this afternoon. Above, the cone answers with the sound of slow rain on a roof that has chosen not to leak. Now the fire asks for decisions larger than crumbs. You take gorse, troublesome by daylight and excellent by night, and snap it into respectful pieces. It pops at the doorway and declares itself more important than it is. You pair it with a strip of green fur to teach restraint. Smoke thickens to a blue that pleases noses and discourages midges. Around the circle, people lean an inch nearer, without quite meaning to. The musicians lift their reeds and set them down again, letting heat set the tempo. You pick up your fan, a square of bark with a stubborn curve, and give 3 slow strokes past the doorway, not at it. The flame leans in the direction you prefer, then straightens like a disciplined child. Coals collect on the little tripod within, beads of orange, spaced like buttons on an old coat. Heat touches your knuckles and decides to stay. A strand of straw that hid under the shavings remembers itself and flashes, leaving behind the hush that follows a tiny boast. The draft strengthens and agrees with the shape you planned. The boy who guarded the brazier tilts his head at your hands. You let him slide closer until his chin shines in the glow. You show him how a twig laid wrong makes a sulky corner, and how one turned a finger's width becomes a bridge for air. He nods with a seriousness that makes you careful with words. He tries a single placement, one thin stick arcing over the doorway like a polite eyebrow, and you praise it by doing nothing to correct it. The flame approves with a soft fabric sound against wood. Heat begins its steady education of the cone. Where the lower ribs cross, you nudge a narrow gap with the tip of your knife so breath can pass without complaint. Resin loosens somewhere above and sends down a scent that feels like remembering a sweet you once liked, and still do. Sparks step out and climb a little, then think better of theater and turn to embers. You add 2 lengths of hazel no thicker than your thumb, set so neither can roll when warming gives them new ideas they do not need. At intervals you stop adding and simply observe. Watching is a kind of feeding too. The doorway brightens and dims with a rhythm that begins to include your own ribs. The cone takes a fuller breath and the ring steps back as one creature by the measure of a boot sole. A woman at the buckets adjusts their spacing with her foot, not because she expects trouble, but because neatness anticipates luck. The rag on the stake points to the meadow and, delighted with its role, stays faithful to the task. You allow one indulgence. The pine cone the boy hid in his pocket. You place it at the edge where it will not earn drama. It ticks, opens, and throws a few deliberate sparks, each too heavy to travel far. The ring enjoys the tiny spectacle and then forgets it, as planned. You follow with broom twigs, crackling like polite applause, and then you stop again. Stopping is as important as adding. Too much kindness at once becomes a burden, even to flames that mean well. The doorway now glows like a modest sunrise confined to 2 hands' width. Heat rolls from it in sheets thin enough to see through, and thick enough to make your cheeks remember summer. You seal one side of the opening with a wedge of oak so the draft will travel deeper before meeting open sky. The effect is immediate and calm, a low, even purr like a cat that has reluctantly admitted affection. Above, the cone settles its shoulders, wood easing into a new idea of itself that intends to last till morning. You rise to stretch, and the boy takes your place. Hands steady, eyes wide but not greedy. You let him tend for a few breaths, then for more. Around you, the ring resumes its quiet conversation, the kind that lives between sips and nods. The musicians, sensing that the fire now keeps its own tempo, pick up a tune that walks rather than runs. You return to kneel once more and place 2 final sticks, then withdraw your hands and leave the doorway to breathe. The flame no longer asks permission. It offers warmth on its own. You carry the first bucket the way you would carry a sleeping cat, steadily, with the assumption that peace is the point. The staves creak a little where hoop meets wood. The handle's iron eye warms your palm. Water rides level because you do not dare boast to it. When you set the bucket down at the circle's rim, it answers with one quiet ring against the earth, as if approving the choice. You tip a palm's worth of damp sand into the water's mouth, so it will remember to behave if asked to leap. The mixture looks like thin porridge, Useful things rarely look impressive. Spacing is not a mystery. You pace a dozen strides and mark the next place with your boot heel. Another bucket arrives there, and another. Each sits in the lee of a small hummock or a boot-wide depression where it will not swagger into a dancer's ankle. You set 2 sacks of sand near the windward side, lids unknotted already, because haste dislikes knots. A boy lugs a shallow tub and sets it beside a low, steady stone, a kind of little altar for last resort. You nod. He stands taller. You do not trust only water. Beside every second bucket you lean a green bough trimmed of twigs and old broom for beating sparks still in the idea stage. Their leaves wet from the well slap against your calf and print a cool shape there. At 2 points downwind you lay shovels and a rake because embers take instruction from iron. No one announces rules. Everyone remembers them anyway. The rag on the stake flutters a little and remains committed to the meadow. The wind's manners hold. Fetching becomes its own quiet pattern. Rope over shoulder, bucket in hand. Path to the well, whose stone lips smell of frog and metal. The wheel creaks. The rope darkens. The bucket descends to find the taste of the day stored in cold. When it returns, you skim what floats little weeds, a curiosity of wings, and pour the clean into the traveling pail. You stir in a scoop of damp sand with a stick stripped smooth by many such nights. The slurry makes a soft hush against the staves, a promise of weight where weight will be needed. You show 2 children the relay they will only pretend is a game. Stand here, you say, and then a pace apart. Stand there. They will pass empty buckets back from the ring and send full ones forward, never crossing paths, never inventing ballet when the dance already exists. They practice with air first, then with a palm's worth of water, laughing without spilling, because laughter gives good balance when it remembers to be quiet. You exchange a glance with their mother that says the work is done even before it starts. At the ring, you set a small wedge of wood under each bucket's far rim, so the hand reaches the surface quickly. The wedge lives in your pocket 364 nights a year. Tonight it performs its trick, and then is forgotten again. You tuck a folded cloth under the hoop of the nearest bucket, the kind of cloth that will be a bandage tomorrow or a potholder the day after. Useful things enjoy multiple lives. A man places a coil of rope between 2 stations, in case a cart needs shifting, without creating a rumor. The rope keeps still like a snake asleep under a patch of sun. The woman who minds the buckets tests the line, walking it like a shepherd reading a hedge. She plants her foot near each and checks that the ground will not roll. Where a stone imagines it is important, she nudges it aside with the toe of her shoe. In 2 places, she urges you to widen the gap. You oblige because anyone who touches water this much has the right to tell space where to sit. She removes a beetle from one lid and apologizes to it for the inconvenience. The beetle forgives everyone and goes on with its night. You pour a little of the sand water onto the ground to show a teenager the sound of not enough and the sound of just enough. Not enough splashes and laughs and accomplishes nothing. Just enough arrives like a confident whisper, heavy and calm. He hears the difference and shrugs a promise to remember. You position him near the tallest bucket because height lends reach. He asks if sparks truly travel so far. You point to your sleeve where earlier, a bragging ember made a brown dot when you were not looking. He nods at the lesson written in wool. Beside the cone's doorway, you set a flat pan of damp earth raked to the depth of a thumb. If a coal stumbles out drunk on its own heat, the pan will pat it back into manners. Near the musicians, you place an extra bucket no one will admit to needing, because reeds dry when people forget to blink. The pipes taste the air and approve of your preparation without pausing their tune. The fire lifts its shoulders another inch. Warmth finds the backs of your hands and moves in as if it rented the room yesterday and means to stay the winter. When all is placed, you walk the ring a final time with the calm of a person who is not looking for flaws, only for opportunities to be kind to the next hour. The bucket ears face outward for quick hands. The sand sacks lie open like quiet mouths. The brooms lean where they will be reached without thinking. The shovels look like simple arguments laid out in case of need. You touch each bucket with the back of your fingers and feel the cool through wood. You listen for the small slosh that says full, not greedy. You settle near your station and fold your legs. The circle breathes. The rag agrees with the meadow. The well takes a rest. until someone remembers thirst. Near your boot, the wedge waits for its second usefulness, tilting a brand when dawn asks. The night keeps stretching without complaint. You look down the arc of pails and tools, and see a necklace of practical thoughts laid gently on the grass. It is not heroic, it is thorough. You lean your shoulder into the air, and the air leans back, and the bonfire grants you the kind of warmth that rewards preparation, steady, reasonable, and uninterested in drama. You find the musicians in a shallow crease of hillside, where the grass keeps the shape of old knees. They choose the practical corner between a bucket and a sack of sand, as if even tunes prefer to sit near useful things. The binioù rests in the piper's lap like a small bellows creature. He presses the seam with 2 knuckles and listens to leather answer. The bombarde lies across a shawl, its reed tucked under a damp scrap, so the night will not steal more moisture than it should. Both men breathe a slow, measuring breath of craftsmen about to begin, neither anxious nor proud, only ready. Tuning begins as bread begins quiet checking. A thin drone curls from the pipe and learns the temperature of air. It circles once, complains, then forgives everyone, and settles half a thumb toward true. The bombarde replies with a dry cough of a note, then another a hair higher, then the same again softer, like a guest trying a chair. You stand where you can feel their breath without interrupting it, letting your own lungs locate the same small pace. The wind leaves a pocket of stillness for them. Into that pocket the first scale rises without hurry, the way smoke would climb if it had very good manners. The piper tightens his elbow and a squeak vanishes. A thumb rubs the reed and the complaint loosens. Between them a conversation happens without verbs, one note leaning, the other answering, the path kept level. People gather as moths do, pretending to fuss with laces and broom bindings while their ears attend. A girl with ash on her cheek sways, notices herself, and keeps swaying because the body knows before politeness is consulted. You notice the tidy kit, a linen roll of reeds, a feather for clearing boars, a bit of beeswax, a knife whose edge knows both bark and cane. The bombarde player warms the reed under his palm, rolls it like dough, and sets it again. The first phrase of a familiar tune wanders out, not to perform, simply to see whether its shoes still fit. The binioù matches the drone to it. Thin sound thickens into wool. Warmth reaches your ears before your hands. Music has that habit. The tune chooses, a walking pace noon would stride, market morning would hop. This one keeps beside a friend without costing breath. The ring shifts inward a careful inch. No one claps. Approval is a shared exhale. They try call and answer. The pipe asks a hill. The bombarde replies with a valley, back and forth, until shapes stop competing and resemble a lane between hedges. You think good playing is mostly careful listening to air, to wood, to neighbors, to the sly intelligence of cane. Small adjustments continue. The piper tightens a thread at the chanter with a thumbnail. The thread accepts the lesson. He nudges the bag. The drone walks half a finger toward rightness. The bombarde trims a whisper from the reed's tip, the way one trims a fingernail past splinters. The instrument answers with a tone that stops trying to be admirable and is simply comfortable. You glance at the ring. The rag still favors the meadow. The fire glows with the calm grammar of something that could continue till morning without advice. The musicians exchange a small nod and let the first tune begin, not performance, only the natural consequence of being tuned. The andro steps out like a neighbor using a familiar doorway. Circle hands find one another. Shawls lie safely along elbows. Boots learn the difference between dust and grass by touch. The melody draws an even thread through the cloth of the night. If the thread snags, the players lower the hand and free it. If it runs smooth, they leave it alone. Ordinary is perfect enough. You do not join yet. You stand behind the line and let shoulders remember first. The binioù leans on its steady note like a beam content to hold a roof forever. The bombarde lays stepping stones of melody across an invisible brook. Feet cross without looking down. Even a misstep lands like a small joke the tune meant to tell. A cooler stripe of air slides across the common and asks a difficult question. The bombarde breathes a finger stronger so the tone will not dry into complaint. The pipe narrows the elbows squeeze. The bag replies with a steadier hiss. The tune does not falter. It puts on a coat and continues. People at the rim Take a half step nearer to warmth, and then pretend they always stood there. Between tunes, there is housekeeping. The reed is wiped and reseated. Leather is hugged and patted like a creature that has done its job. A boy offers a sip from a leather flask that is obviously cider. They drink and make the same polite face tartness approved. Next tune promised warmer. Someone passes a folded galette, and the piper tucks it under his knee as if keeping a page. Another piece begins. Not livelier, just differently inclined. This one walks downhill and then back up, teaching the body how to rise and settle without fuss. You think of hedges, lanes, roofs dark toward the sea, and of work done earlier that already feels like last week. Music stitches the hours so nothing falls out at the edges. When the set pauses for two shared breaths, you offer the bombarde player the square of cloth you used to lift the brazier lid. He raps the bell a moment, warming wood that had been cool enough to sulk. Better, he says to no one, meaning everyone. The piper draws a satisfied line across the circle and back. Dancers let hands fall and keep feet marking a rhythm too small to see. Tuning is never finished. It simply becomes part of playing, the way a foundation disappears under a house. You return to your bucket, feel heat lick your shins and music brush your sleeve, and learn that both answer to the same economy. If fed too much at once, they grow loud and then tired. If tended steadily, they last. You open your hands to the night. The tune carries on at the pace of breathing. The circle follows. You take a hand because the hand is there, and because refusal would be a conversation you did not schedule. Fingers link sometimes whole hands, sometimes little fingers, with a gentle curl, a chain that feels less like a chain and more like a well-made rope. The circle tightens until warmth reaches shins and cheeks, cool on your back, hot on your front, a sensible compromise. The ground has learned the step from other years. Your soles feel a faint groove dented by other evening's feet. The music offers a patient line. You join it. The andro begins sideways, as always. A small step, another small step. A gather that tidies what the first two started. The feet agree to move more than the body appears to move. This is courtesy disguised as dance. Your left shoe scuffs dust into a small memory. Your right heel kisses the earth and does not demand attention. Hands lift just enough to keep the rope alive. The circle answers the tune's thread, not with spectacle, only with agreement. You do not count out loud, but the body counts anyway. Breath finds a pace that suits everything else. In for the step, out for the gather. A little laugh when someone near the end learns the left from the right, too late and too earnestly. If the rope feels a sudden tug, the line forgives and smooths it. No one falls into excellence by accident, and no one is asked to try. Behind your lids, light flickers orange-red through lashes. When you open them, sparks lift and retire like shy insects. The bonfire threads taller than the hedges and then remembers humility. Shawls bump your forearms like soft opinions. Wool carries the day's smells, smoke, sheep, cider, a hint of onion that will not quit. The bombarde walks a clear path. The binioù hums the horizon. Your boots make an honest noise, a grown-up shuffle, not the jump of market morning. As the circle glides, warmth moves along your lower legs in obedient sheets, then settles. Cool air licks the back of your neck and betrays you to no one. Eyes travel to the rag on the stake and back, still faithful to the meadow. The circle grows by one, then two, then shrinks when someone remembers a pan left near the coals. The rope accepts substitutions without complaint. A child takes an ant's place for 3 measures and learns the difference between moving and kicking. The line lowers its expectations and therefore loses nothing. You let your grip soften and then firm, like telling a story to a sleepy listener. A neighbor's palm is dry and steady. Yours remembers the well and the buckets and gives thanks by not slipping. On the downwind side, smoke folds over the grass in a low scarf. The tune adjusts its sleeves to the air and continues. The ground near the buckets stays untroubled, because the circle remembers to arc generously there, a courtesy to water and hands. You feel the small rise where a root once made itself important. You lift your toe just enough, then forget the problem because the rope has already learned it and accounts for it in its own bookkeeping. Dancing is housekeeping performed sideways. Footwork becomes less a list and more a habit. 3 left, tidy right, A thoughtful pause that is not a pause, only a small step that refuses drama. Someone hums when the melody glides past a familiar corner. You do not hum, but your jaw loosens, as if it might later. Shadows twine across faces, making saints and mischief by turns. The fire flings a brief braid of light into the night, and the circle pretends not to notice, because attention is a spice best used sparingly. At the change, the musicians signal with something smaller than a nod and intake of air, a blink on the offbeat, and the rope answers with a half-turn of wrists. The line flows the other way around the fire. Nothing is reversed. Everything continues differently. Your hips learn that the ground tilts slightly toward the brook. Your feet make that knowledge look like poise. The circle breathes. You breathe with it. The flames, interested but not jealous, keep their own verse of the same song. The older ones at the far side hold the rope with a scholar's accuracy. Fingers firm, elbows low, foot small, never bored because boredom is simply a step done too loudly. They glow the color of fresh bread at a hearth mouth. You find yourself mirroring them, shaving off extra motion like trimming a hedge to please the path. A woman to your right murmurs a reminder. Let the hand lead the foot. You do, and the step becomes immeasurably easier, which is one of life's sillier secrets. Cider and breath sweeten the air. Someone laughs in the hinge of the tune, then stops to keep laughter from tripping feet. The line slides closer to the cone on 2 measures, away on the next. Never enough to flirt with sparks, always enough to feel the heat's punctuation. A stray ember lands near the edge and thinks better of staying. A wet broom leaf sends it on its way without comment. You are grateful and say nothing, because gratitude and silence pair well. After 2 tunes, the bombarde rests its reed on a sleeve. The piper lets the drone purr alone, a cat left to guard the doorstep. The rope remains linked, swaying in that useful way people sway when neither moving nor not moving. You roll your shoulders once, and wool settles back where shoulders live. The circle relaxes into a low conversation with the ground. Thank you for not surprising us. We will not surprise you. A gust flirts with the meadow, fails to change anyone's mind, and leaves. Someone steps out and someone else steps in, and still, the step refuses to become anything but itself. You finally look down at your boots and see dust softening their shape. You look up again and prefer the faces. A row of agreeable seriousness lit by fire and mistake, proofed by music. Your own face probably wears the same expression concentration that forgot to furrow. The line makes another quiet circuit. The tune ends by not ending so much as deciding to lean against a fence for a moment. Hands release without falling apart. The rope becomes people again, pleased and unadvertised. You rub your palms and feel heat still there, a private coal. The drummer who does not exist beats something with the heel of a boot, which lights nothing and satisfies a need to mark time anyway. The circle loosens into smaller circles talk near buckets. Someone checking a brand, someone adjusting a shawl. Your legs know they have moved and seem grateful for the chance to pretend they did not. You stand back a pace to give the ring space to grow again when the next tune wants company. Fire leans and straightens. The rag stays polite. The buckets wait, slightly smug. You blow out a breath and taste wool and ash and the apple of last autumn pretending to be summer. The andro goes on without you for a turn, and then you slide back into place because the rope, like a good bench, always leaves the right amount of room. You notice how shadows grow curious when the fire finds its posture. They lengthen and shrink, and children notice first. At the rim, a small cluster unhooks from mother's hems and sidles toward the light. You drift that way too, not because anyone calls you, but because being nearby is a simple craft. A boy uses his boot to cut a doorway in shadow, steps through, and laughs at the miracle of reappearing. Another child lifts both hands, and the dark makes antlers on the grass. She lowers them quickly, pleased and a little startled. Breath moves in steady sheets. Sparks rise, decide the sky is far, and retire. Mothers pretend to scold in the tone reserved for good behavior headed toward better judgment. There, they say, and not there, and closer to me, but not on me. One keeps a hand at a small cloak like a sailor keeps a hand on a rope. Another monitors with her foot. You hold a broom branch, green and wet at the leaves, the right tool for correcting optimism. The ground near the rim holds a crescent of warmed earth where children test courage. They hop forward and back across that strip, as if it were a river that might widen without notice. You show them the rule you will keep pretending is a game. Toes to the line, knees soft, eyes on the spot where feet will land. You demonstrate with an exaggeratedly boring hop that wins no applause and sets a perfect example. Someone has raked a thin finger of embers to one side until the glow looks thoughtful rather than proud. The smallest boy asks whether hopping across it counts the same as hopping near it. You tell him the difference is like smelling cider and swimming in it. He nods as if he has never seen cider but intends to. A mother taps your sleeve, permission given and measured, and you tilt your broom in agreement. One by one, the braver knees try a quick, truthfully unimpressive leap across the ember's thinnest idea of itself. You stand upwind, with your broom ready to smother arrogance. The woman with the bucket stands downwind with her palm on the hoop, prepared to pour if a spark considers becoming an anecdote. Mostly there is nothing to do but hum softly and let children confirm a rumor worth keeping. The night was warm enough to step over. The music keeps walking, trying not to comment on the side scene. The tune is a lane. The children's game is a footpath that joins it and meanders away. A boy misjudges by half a shoe length and proves immune to consequences because you tip the ash with your broom at the right moment, turning bright into dull. He says, "Ha," as if he planned your rescue. You return the look elders use for victories won by committee. After each hop you dust soles on a patch of damp soil set aside for this. It smells of clay and difficult vegetables. It cools the confidence in leather and children alike. A girl offers fern crumbs from a pocket and sprinkles the ash stripe so it hisses and sighs into smaller ambition. She watches the smoke and then your face. You nod, and that nod will do more work later when she explains she helped. Between tries, they play with shadow again, learning that a sideways step makes the fire draw lines across cheeks like paint. A boy hides the lower half of his face behind shade and looks like someone the night invented. Quiet pride suits everyone. You keep a low stream of instruction that does not sound like instruction. Wait for the breeze to rest, you say, and count to 2 slower than seems dignified. You tell them to breathe in before the hop. If someone grows glitter-eyed, you let them hold your broom for a minute. It soaks up the glitter like a mild charm. At your shoulder, the bucket woman shifts from left foot to right, companion to this small theater. She tips the pail and lets sandwater lick the lip, testing the angle. You admire her restraint the way one admires a steady drone present, modest, impossible to do without. When 2 sparks float farther than their size recommends, she ruins their ambition with a quick splash. A ring of older children forms a soft fence behind the younger ones. They have already hopped and carry satisfaction like warm stones. Now they police the game by getting in the way of foolishness and calling it help. One keeps time by patting his knee on the second beat. Another narrates in a whisper for her own amusement. You let them. Authority travels well hand to hand. The fire feeds the game the warmth required, and not one moment more. When a gust pushes, you step in, and the line becomes not available. Children accept the verdict with the tragic grace of people who know bedtime exists. They return to shadow tricks, antlers, giants, disappearing acts that fool only those who wish to be fooled. The mothers soften and permit a smile small enough to hide under a thimble. In a lull, you rake the ember stripe thinner and teach one last trick. Test heat with the back of a hand in the air above, never with anything you cannot afford to replace. Foreheads lean, hands hover like cautious birds, and several decide the story they earned is sufficient. You praise decision the way one praises daring. The broom settles across your knees. The bucket woman rests her wrist on the hoop. The music drifts toward a cadence and then declines to arrive. By the time the rope gathers for the next tune, the ember line is memory, and the shadow animals are tired of rehearsal. You sweep the place clean with 2 strokes and pat it with a damp shovel so the ground will forget. Children drift back to shawls that smell of wool and patience. Mothers test ear warmth and find it acceptable. You return a small shoe to its owner, who ties it like inventing knots for the first time and doing well. You step back into the ring as if nothing happened and everything did. A lesson fitted to the size of an evening. A handful of nerves turned into stories that will not need editing. The fire breathes the same slow breath. The rag nods to the meadow. The bucket's surface smooths as if never agitated. You open your hands and the night fills them with warmth, which is what's needed. You notice a small bustle near the downwind edge where baskets rest in the grass. Women kneel with the calm a garden rewards, loosening bundles tied with flax cord. Inside the baskets lie leaves layered like book pages, fern fronds with tidy ribs, narrow sprigs of sharp green, and tufts of yellow flowers pressed by the day into sleep. You take a place and accept a bundle. The stems tickle your palm. A woman shows you the motion. Pinch, crumble, let fall into the shallow bowl of sparks where the cone's skirt hangs an inch above earth. Dry edges break like old paper. Green centers sigh and send up a thin ribbon of scent from hedge banks and paths no map bothers to mention. Sparks greet the herbs like a polite crowd, recognizing a familiar face. They lift and vanish, a handspan at most more shimmer than travel. The rag on the stake flutters as if gossip reached it late. Here sparks are watched. Broom leaves lean ready. Buckets keep their mouths open, tasting air the way a careful cook tastes broth. The fire breathes. You match its pace. Another woman pinches a braid of fine roots, dried and soft as thread. She scatters them across the ember pocket. The smell that rises is not kitchen, not field sharp at first, then kind. A man sets down his cup and, with 2 fingers, drops a pinch as if seasoning a story. He watches the sparks and keeps his opinion to himself. You choose fern, because fern looks like coolness given leaves. Crushed between your fingers, it remembers rain. When it meets heat, it makes a small, crisp whisper, only agreement. A girl beside you uses the yellow petals, dry as paper light. They go up like quiet confetti, and she claps once, in spite of her mother's look. She hides her hands and returns to careful pinches. Someone brings a small earthen cup and shows how to tumble a mix, so each pinch carries 3 ideas: leaf, flower, root. You take a turn. Your palm becomes a little meadow, then a hill path. You let the pinch fall low and sideways so it rides the draft and does not invent trouble. A few sparks try for altitude and fail politely. The cone returns to breathing like a large animal on guard. At intervals you pause and simply hold the bundle, letting scent rise before you let go. Neighbors trade pinches the way people trade nods. An ant rubs 2 leaves along the fringe of her shawl and smiles at the stubborn wool. You show a younger boy to drop his pinch on the windward side and to shade the doorway with his palm, so draft becomes a friend. The scent climbs, midges retreat. Someone murmurs old words under breath, not to bind anything, only to keep company. Embers wink like sleepy eyes. You learn to feed little and wait. Herbs have practical jobs that keep their pride in order. A sprig hung from a lintel asks flies to attend another household. A bed stuffed with certain leaves finds a new modesty. Tonight the work is simpler. Feed the air small comforts so the air remembers to be kind. You find you have been humming 10 steps without permission. The tune already knows the road. You find the rhythm that uses no thought at all. Pinch, crumble, release. Pause to feel whether the draft still passes where it should. Glance at the rag. Glance at the buckets. Your fingertips keep the scent and turn resigned slick, dedicated rather than dirty. You lick your thumb by accident and taste green, almost peppered. The fire edits it into sweetness. You rub your hands and the stickiness becomes shine. A basket offers twigs of a shrub that prefers poor soil. They look unimpressed with everything. You break 2 and are surprised by the clean snap. When the pieces meet heat, they make a neat blue that looks like a bruise thinking about healing. Smoke drifts toward meadow and becomes the kind of smell a sheep might trust. An elder lifts a hand after a cough to say he is fine, then offers his own pinch. The musicians edge closer while pretending not to. A tune that had walked now stretches like someone waking from a short, agreeable sleep. The bombarde tastes the changed air and lowers its shoulders. The binioù finds a note that rests more easily. You remain at your station, because work done with small movements is often warmer than fast steps. Heat folds around your shins and stays. You try a trick taught without teaching. Hold the pinch high, then let it sift through your other hand, so it breaks twice and becomes more useful. What falls looks like a brief green snow that never considers ground. Sparks accept the gift and speak once, a tiny tick, like a lark correcting its grammar. A boy imitates you more carefully than he will admit later. His pinch is miserly, and therefore perfect. The night grows a flavor richer by an inch. Even the buckets smell faintly of hillside. The earthen cup goes around the circle like bread. No one keeps it. Everyone uses it. Someone adds a sprig of something bitter, and the fire answers with a stern puff that scolds a midge and then forgives it. The hill keeps its patience. The sea reminds the wind to behave when the basket lies almost bare. You gather stray leaves from the grass so the ground will not wonder what happened. A woman ties the last bundle tight with its flax and tucks it under her arm for later. A friend for a doorway when dawn punches holes in the dark. You rinse your fingers in a little bowl of well water and watch green swirl into a lighter idea, then wipe your hands dry. You step back to take the cone's measure. It stands the way a good chair stands ready for weight, uninterested in compliments. The rag still salutes the meadow. The brooms wait with wet leaves turned outward. The buckets show dark moons that spill only when asked. Sparks lift and agree to retire early. Music bends itself around the scent and smooths it. You breathe in root and leaf and fire, then give the night only breath in return. You hear the bells before you see the horns. A thin tinny chime wanders up the lane, not a parade, only a reminder that iron exists. You step to the ring's edge where the ground lies plainest and open a quiet corridor with your arm. Two oxen turn the corner with the quarter-moon patience of creatures that have tasted every kind of weather and found none worth arguing with. Their breath rises white, then gray, then gone. Foreheads shine where a brush passed earlier in the yard. Ropes ride low at their chins, and a wooden yoke rests easy across withers, polished by work in winter. Smoke at the cone's base drifts in a blue ribbon. It lifts and thins where the doorway pulls it, then settles in a shallow arch toward the meadow. This is the lane you want. You show the boy with your palm, and he sets his feet to match the curve you draw in the air. The woman at the buckets nudges one pail a pace back so water will not become a rumor under a hoof. A broom waits in your other hand, green, damp, and certain about what Sparks should learn. You speak to the oxen in the conversation. Animals understand not a sentence, a shape. Doucement, you say, ironed long so it lasts. The lead animal, broad brow, a nick in one horn like a bitten crescent, turns an ear the size of a hand. The second follows, because following is a craft too. You keep your body a little ahead, and to the side, a polite shadow that does not insist. The boy copies your angle without noticing he has done so. Rope settled light over his palm. They step into the shallow smoke. Nothing dramatic happens. That is exactly the point. Their hides take on a faint gleam, as if seen through thin water. The ribbon curls around knees and underbellies, rises to the dewlap, then wanders off to trouble no one. Old people in the ring watch without comment. Someone clears a throat when a spark considers a tail. Your broom answers with a quick tap that leaves nothing to remember. The bells sound again, not in pride, only because a neck moved. You watch the feet. Splayed hooves place themselves wide, then narrower, then wide again as the ground decides what to be. The left ox tests the ash with the side of his hoof and gives a small, satisfied snort, as if critiquing a forge. The right flicks one ear and discovers the banner of smoke, changes nothing important. Together they find the rhythm the dance found earlier. Small, small, gather. Small, small, gather. The man at the far rope keeps his gaze low, trusting you to watch what he cannot. At the doorway, the heat shows a firmer hand, so you bend the path outward, drawing a curve you could make in your sleep. Smoke follows. The oxen follow smoke because their fathers did, and because habit is one of the world's better angels. You take 3 unhurried steps. They take the same. When their bellies pass the warmest place, breath comes deeper, and you imagine winter hiding in their lungs, deciding it is out of fashion. A small flake of ash lands on a shoulder and decides to be nothing. A girl near the musicians counts softly to herself, not the oxen, not anyone, just a measure that keeps worry busy. The bombarde player rests his reed and watches the blue ribbon break and reseal. He nods when the path holds. The piper finds a slow drone that hums underneath everything. A low seam sewing ox to earth, earth to smoke, smoke to people. Your hand loosens around the rope loosens around the jaw loosens around the bit of iron that never insists, and therefore always persuades. At the far side, you let the pair stand. You flatter them with silence, praise them with stillness, as if you have all read the same good sentence. The boy touches the nicked horn with one finger, and the ox does not mind. Someone offers a handful of hay. Heavy mouths explore the idea, and then choose the business of chewing as if it had been their plan for months. The smoke trails after and anoints their shoulders once more for good measure. The bells quiet to a soft clink, 2 coins in a pocket. You turn them for a second pass, not because once was not enough, but because twice makes a story, and thrice makes a superstition. 2 passes suit an evening that has nothing to prove. This time the boy goes first, and you become the shadow who listens with your feet. The lead animal twitches a fly out of existence with his skin. The second follows as if tied by thought. The bells find the same notes and are pleased by their own memory. The circle opens a hand's width to let them through, and closes it again. Between passes you note what you always note, and therefore never need say. Tails stay still when minds are calm. Ears swing when a draft lies. Eyes soften when heat feels like weather, not news. The bucket woman does not watch the oxen. She watches you watching them, timing her attention to yours the way a drone times itself to breath. A small spark lands on the right ox's back and dies there of boredom because its first job tonight is to fail. You brush it away anyway. Care that no one notices is still care. Others bring their pair cows with a bell that sounds like a spoon in a clay cup. A heifer with the unfortunate holiness of a saint painted in haste. Each takes the same gentle arch through the blue. A calf hesitates at the edge, and then remembers that mothers exist. The ring pretends not to smile at how quickly fear can be cured by milk. You widen the lane by a hand, draw the broom once across the ground to settle ash, and the air obliges by thickening for a heartbeat, and then thinning. The old man with wrists like rope tells you about a year when frost ate hooves as if they were apples, and how smoke helped even then. He tells it without teaching, which is the best kind. You answer with a nod shaped like meant gratitude. The oxen lower heads as if to hear and discover the grass tastes the same on both sides of the lane. In the doorway, the embers mutter approval, brightening and then settling, pleased to be invited to a task that asks so little glory of them. On the last pass, with most of the village's patience already given to warmth and tune, you walk the pair slower than a prayer and faster than pride. The bells place small coins of sound along the ground. The circle breathes with you the way it did for dance. The smoke opens and closes like a book. The wind reads aloud to a child on the edge of sleep. When you step clear, the boy lets the rope slack, and the oxen consider lying down, but decide against it. There is chewing, and chewing is a respectable vocation. You guide them back down the lane where the night keeps its cool, and where cattle know the map better than people do. The boy thanks you with a look too serious for his age. You answer with the look the night uses when it approves of learning. The bells fade left, then right, then dissolve into the general idea of metal in a world that still prefers wood. You return to the ring, brush your palm on your sleeve, and take up your station again. The smoke keeps a steady grammar. The fire lifts one shoulder and continues its long sentence. Behind you, the piper ties the thread he set down neatly to the next tune. The ring loosens and then draws in again. Somewhere, a bucket accepts a thin pour and is pleased by its own usefulness. You hang the damp broom on a stake to keep its leaves from sulking. The lane you used fades back into undisturbed grass. You touch the rag on the pole. It still points toward meadow, faithful to its only opinion. The oxen's breath has already become night again. You open your hands to the heat and let the hour move through you the way smoke moves through air, quiet, steady, unhurried. You go hunting for the kind of stone that minds its manners, not round rolls when the night grows ideas. Flat, palm wide, no hidden sparkle that screams to crack when heated. The pile waits near the hedge bank where you left it last year. River-worn pieces collected at low water, scrubbed of moss when the sun pretended to be generous. You choose 4 that feel like plates pretending to be geology. You rub a wet thumb across each and listen. Quiet stones say nothing. Loud stones say crack, and you ignore them like bad advice. At the lee side of the cone, the coals have settled into a red basin. Heat moves in sheets there, sensible and unambitious. You clear a shallow shelf with your shovel, Push aside a bragging stick and lay the stones along the edge like moons on a horizon. Not too close. Stones dislike surprises even more than people do. A woman with a bundle of cloths joins you. She folds a square and lays it on the ground for the first hot one later. She tests the air with her palm and nods at your placement as if you have remembered a recipe. A pot shows up as if summoned by good intentions. It is broad-bellied, squat, hung on an iron hook that has visited too many winters to care about this one. Inside sloshes cider from last autumn, clouded a little, honest as ditch water and twice as friendly. The owner sets it on a trivet hacked from 3 green wands and a short iron bar. You adjust one leg with your boot so the pot sits without inventing a story. The first wisp of steam rises and then sits down again. It will stand properly soon enough. Nearby, a wooden bowl enjoys a warm corner, tucked between 2 modest heatstones. A cloth covers it like a cap on a thoughtful head. You know without lifting it what sleeps there. Buckwheat batter resting out its small sulk. It carries that faint farm smell, earth, field, the kind of flourish grain makes when given water and left alone. You dip one finger under the cloth and find the surface thickened, bubbles like the smallest coins. You wipe your finger on your trouser seam and pretend you never met temptation. Stonework is patience, dressed as tidiness. With a green switch, you flick a dash of water across the nearest slab. It answers with the right sound purr, not scream. Steam beads and vanishes. You edge it a finger closer, then wait again. When you think the stone is ready, you set the back of your hand a hand's height above it and let the air tell you its number. It counts as warm bread counts, enough to comfort, not enough to scold. You nod to no one in particular. The cider pot begins a small conversation with itself. A ring forms on the inside like a weather map for people who prefer drinks to predictions. You stir with a stripped hazel wand, scrape the bottom with the respect owed to anything that will later sweeten a mouth. The steam carries apple and cellar and a memory of wasp. The nearest musician claims the smell helps a reed keep courage. This may be science or hope. Both work. You lift the first stone with 2 sticks, a clumsy grace that keeps fingers where fingers belong. Onto the folded cloth it goes, then onto another, then into a waiting basket lined with a bit of old wool. A woman slips a thin stack of yesterday's bread between 2 stones and tucks the lot under a shawl, as if swaddling a child that never complains. Another stone adopts a wedge of cheese that appreciates warmth the way people appreciate approval, reluctantly at first, then enthusiastically. At the edge of the red basin you set a small slate to act as messenger between heat and batter. Slate reports faithfully. It cracks if insulted. You give it the politeness one gives a prickly elder. When it feels ready, you wipe it with a cloth kissed by tallow quick and thin. The cloth admits nothing. The stone glistens just enough. You do not pour batter yet. Impatience spoils more meals than salt. Someone brings a ladle that knows its trade, and a wooden spreader worn into an oval exact as a remembered face. The bowl of batter breathes a little when you lift the cloth. You stir from the outside in, listening for the sound that means bubbles are becoming a family. The first test pour is the size of a hand and shaped like a country no map would bother with. It sits, it shivers, it takes an even color at the edges, and you lift it off with the tip of your knife to admit that yes, the slate is ready to behave. You return to stones, because stones are the silent chorus that keeps the stage honest. One goes under the pot on its cold side to even the hum. Another slides nearer the basin to warm for hands that have been on rope and broom and deserve a simple luxury. You turn a stone with your sticks and it shows a skin of blackened sap, handsome as a frost map. You wipe it with damp grass and let it decide whether it forgives you. It does. A boy hovers with a tin cup, the sort that gives you someone else's tooth marks if you are not careful. You dip him a ladle of cider, no ceremony. Plenty of steam. He blows with the earnestness of a scholar and then grins around the heat. You set a stone near his boots and tell him to stand like a cormorant, 1 foot at a time, warming souls without bragging to the fire. He obeys and becomes very tall. The bucket woman, finished circling her stations, steps in and holds her palms over a warm slab, a queen making sure a subject is properly thanked. She approves the cider with a sound so small, only the steam hears it. You offer her the first salted edge of bread from the shawl basket. She pretends reluctance for form's sake and then eats with attention, which is the most honest praise. Heat sees this and decides to go on existing. The pot begins to make the small sound that could become a boil, if not taught manners. You shift the trivet a finger toward quiet and drop in 2 slices of dried apple, because generosity improves everything it touches, except buckets. The cider darkens by the idea of a shade. People nearby inhale like it was their own good work. The bombarde plays a run as if to agree. You scoop ash away from one stone that grew too enthusiastic, then rake a little toward another that lagged. The basin's breath evens. The door you cut at the cone's base glows with the authority of a good hearth. You add nothing to it. Enough is arriving all by itself. On the slate, the first true circle of batter spreads with a sound like a cat thinking about purring. But that is a task for another section. For now it is stones and steam and the warm wait between wanting and eating. You sit back on your heels and look at the order you have made. Stones in a crescent, pot thinking aloud, bowl veiled against mischief, cloths folded for hands that will be asked to perform. The rag still salutes the meadow. The buckets keep their dark moons. Sparks rise, fail pleasantly, and retire from public life. You offer your palms to a warm slab, and it gives comfort so sensible you almost laugh at yourself. The night approves with a little drift of sweeter smoke. Someone says, nearly, about nothing in particular, and everyone understands. You take up the ladle as if it were a quiet word you intend to say once and well. The bowl of batter waits under its cloth, breathing in that slow way living things do when given a little warmth and no interruption. You stir from edge to center, coaxing bubbles into something like agreement. The slate at the ember's rim holds a steady heat. You test it with the back of your hand at a respectful height, and it tells you yes without raising its voice. A cloth kissed with tallow smooths the surface to a faint shine that catches firelight the way a pond catches moon. The first pour is small, modest as a greeting. You let batter fall in a round, then guide it with the wooden spreader, one circle, another, the hand barely touching stone. The sound is the softest rain. The rim turns darker, then the whole face of it blushes a warm, even brown that smells of field and cupboard, and a good kind of dust. Steam lifts, thin and honest. You slide the edge of a knife under the circle and feel the resistance give. The way a story lets you turn the page when you have been patient. You flip. It lands without complaint. The second is larger, a feeling your wrist remembers from years you did not count. You pour. You draw the circle thinner. You listen to the whisper that says enough. A woman beside you holds a wooden board at the ready, its surface dark with history. You slide the first galette onto it, and she lays a cloth across the top to keep it from boasting to the air. The board becomes a small hill of folded warmth triangles, quarters, little pockets that puff and collapse into obedience. Butter visits like a neighbor who knows not to overstay. A pat softens on a warm stone and learns to travel under a brush made from the end of a reed. You sweep a thin shine across the slate before the next pour, and the whole world smells faintly of salt and pasture. Someone breaks a smear of fresh curd, sets a spoon of it on a circle, and you fold it once, then twice, keeping the edges neat so steam has a way out. A thin stripe of apple from the cider pot dances at the thought and stays where it is put. The rhythm steadies and begins to feel like breathing. Ladle, spread, watch, turn, fold, pass. A child counts 3 in a whisper and then loses interest in counting because eating holds better arithmetic. You blow across a finished edge to cool it enough for small fingers. The butter shines like a memory. The boy who guarded the brazier takes a triangle and pinches it at the corner like a letter he would prefer to keep for later, then fails to keep it for longer than 2 breaths. You trust stone more than talk. When it grows bold, you slide it a finger from the red and rake another closer. When it hesitates, you nudge coals toward it and hush their pride with a skim of ash. The slate does its part with that useful stubbornness slate owns. Every few rounds you wipe it with the tallow cloth, and it returns to good manners, ready for another circle that will pretend it is the first. Neighbors arrive and vanish in a gentle tide. A man with a reed case in his pocket accepts a folded quarter and nods as if tuning also happens in the mouth. A girl with ash on her cheek holds her galette with both hands and studies it as though it will speak. It answers in steam. The bucket woman takes hers standing. one foot on a warm stone, as if adoring her own cleverness without confessing it. You keep the board supplied, and the board keeps disappearing under hands, grateful for something that explains why evenings like this are always longer than you expected and shorter than you wanted. A light sprinkle of coarse salt lives in a wooden pinch pot near your knee. You lift 3 grains and let them fall on a circle before the fold. They become invisible and necessary. You add nothing more. The batter has its own voice, nutty and calm, and the heat chooses a steady patience that tastes like kindness. If someone asks for sweet, a spoon of cider from the pot finds its way into a crease. It wets the crumb and then disappears, leaving the idea of apple behind. You teach a small lesson without calling it a lesson. A boy takes the spreader too fast, and the circle tears. You show him the slower turn elbow a hinge, wrist a whisper, the tool barely kissing the batter. His second try is better, his third correct, his fourth unremarkable in the best sense. He grins into the fire as if he had done nothing, which is exactly what the work prefers. Between circles, you glance at the rag on its stake. It still tilts toward meadow, honest and a little proud. You glance at the buckets, dark moons, quiet mouths. The brazier breathes behind your shoulder. Its ember has the patience of a seed under loam. You turn a galette that has forgotten to be sticky and place it on the board without letting your attention change shape. Hands arrive, hands depart. The stack lowers and rises like tide. You prepare a thin circle intended for the musician's pause. It cooks faster because compliments make everything hurry. You add a shaving of cheese so thin it cannot be stingy because it is almost not there at all. It melts into the buckwheat and becomes flavor rather than ingredient. The piper eats with one hand, keeps the drone with the other, and the tune continues to offer its even thread around the ring. You slip another circle onto the slate for the bombarde player and leave it folding itself a beat longer, so he will not miss his place. At times you do nothing but wait with the ladle half lifted, the spreader resting on the rim, your eyes on the line where the edge dries to the exact shade you prefer. Waiting is the skill, more than pouring, more than flipping, more than passing. The fire sets the tempo. You keep to it. The cone's doorway glows behind the stone like a throat that knows how to sing quietly. You draw no attention to it, and the doorway repays you by behaving. You fold one for yourself when the board feels impartial. It burns your fingers just enough to remind you that warmth is not yours by right. It is borrowed. You eat standing, feet apart, one heel a bit back, as if the circle still pulled you into a dance you have only paused. It tastes of field and patience and a rain that did not arrive. Butter lingers as a small argument on your lip. You settle it with your thumb. The night leans inward around the circle. The tune sets another low loop. From far down the lane, a cart remembers a task and then forgets it again. You stack 3 more, pass them, wipe the stone, and pour 2 small for children who value small more than they value full. The board rests at last with only 1 triangle and no claim on it. You leave it there for the person who does not ask. You lay the cloth back over the batter bowl and it sighs. The cider pot thinks about quiet, and you shift its trivet half a finger to invite it there. Stones keep their heat like good benches keep stories, giving back what they have taken slowly, in useful portions. You look at your hands, gloss of butter, flour in the lines, 1 neat dot of ash as a souvenir. You rinse fingers in a small bowl, and the water immediately learns the smell of field and fire. When you turn, the circle has not changed, and has changed entirely. Faces are softer, voices slower, steps near the ring a shade closer to content than they were an hour ago. You set the ladle down and the spreader beside it, tools arranged like 2 reeds in a kit, ready to be honest again. You warm your palms at a stone, let the heat walk into your wrists, and lift your eyes to the fire that still breathes, as if it intends to outlive the night by exactly the right amount. You sit when the sitting becomes a kind of work. The ground there is warmer than you expect, and cooler than your knees would prefer, which is the usual compromise of a decent evening. Around the cone, a loose crescent forms people rearranging themselves into pockets, where talk can keep its hat on. No benches announce themselves. Shawls folded twice become sufficient chairs. A bundle of brushwood decides it can be a cushion, if asked nicely. Someone turns a stone the way one turns a page and finds the blank side, and that, too, counts as hospitality. Stories do not need an invitation. only a place to land. The first begins low, the way a kettle starts to think. A man with wrists like rope clears his throat. He offers a lane-length tale about a cart that sank to its belly in spring and came out only when four neighbors invented a lever out of nothing but insulted timber and a door hinge that owed someone a favor. The lesson, if it is one, is that mud respects no man's shoe and that a hinge will forgive a lot if warmed first. People smile with their mouths shut. Agreement makes a pleasant heat. A woman counteroffers a hen's story because hens always present opportunities for literature. This hen chose the cider loft for a private life and then remembered the ladder is not designed for beaks. There is a visual demonstration with hands, enough for the circle to understand all relevant tragedies were minor, and that the egg survived by being laid somewhere no egg had any right to be. Someone says, "Of course it did," which is a compliment to both hen and storyteller. The fire obliges by cracking at the exact right moment, as if it too has heard hens before. You contribute nothing yet. You sip cider that tastes of last November and of a barrel that still believes in oak. Warmth leans up your shins. Sparks rise and retire like clerks who brought the wrong ledger and are relieved to be sent home. The bombarde hums a line under its breath, a reed testing the room without a reed in its mouth. The piper rolls a shoulder and finds the nut he will not quarrel with tonight. The rag points meadowward, as if it too is interested in narrative structure. An elder with a voice like clean gravel offers a fishing memory that refuses to become a boast. Moonless tide, lines that snagged more weed than wisdom, a lantern that would not stay lit without the application of inventive language, and at the end, one small silver creature that made soup taste honest. The moral, such as it is, suggests that soup remembers kindness more than volume. He folds his hands, and the story folds with him. No one applauds because the sea should not be made self-conscious. Grit humor travels like steam. A boy tells of how his cousin mistook a bishop's hat for a stove lid during harvest dinner and tried to lift it with tongs. He mimes the expression that resulted eyes, eyebrows, dignity all rising separately, and the circle produces the soft laughter reserved for accidents that did no damage to soups, hats, or futures. The broom by your knee nods along. The bucket woman hears the word stove and checks her line without looking. Readiness sneaks into everything when the night is friendly. Not all the stories have incidents. One is simply the list of how the elder's mother liked her linen stored, after bleaching rolled, not folded. Rosemary between layers. The chest opened on damp mornings to let the air remember manners. Another is the inventory of ways the brook sounded in different months. October hungry, February bored, May opinionated. These are exactly the kind that belong here. Descriptions doing their jobs quietly until the heart loosens. You feel your jaw give up its little war with cold. The warmth takes that hill without casualties. When the circle runs out of present, it opens the drawer, marked old, and a tail of lights on the far headland wanders through. They were certainly men with lanterns, and also not entirely men with lanterns, depending on who was watching and how recently they had slept. The point tonight is not to sort that. The point is that someone's grandfather told it with a finger pressed to his nose, as if the sea had whispered directly to that finger. Everyone nods. Nobody claims more than they intend to keep. The bombarde tries one quiet note and puts it away again, like a cat touching a door to be sure it is still there. You are asked for one of yours, and you oblige with the story so little that it nearly isn't. How you cut willow thin for basket ribs, found a beetle pretending to be a knot, and watched it crawl the length of your knife to decide sunlight was not an emergency after all. You shorten the beetle by 3 adjectives and lengthen the knife by none. The point is patience, not heroics. The circle receives this with the precise amount of respect such literature deserves, which is to say, enough to make you feel you brought something, not enough to burden you with future expectations. Around the edges, mending continues. Someone unpicks a seam that had ambitions above its skill. A man tightens a strap that wanted to retire before its time. A child counts the holes in a good sock, as if the numbers are edible. The fire offers punctuation, a pop to underline, a sigh to close a sentence. Cider is passed carefully. The board that earlier held galettes now holds a lone heel of bread, gnawed at dignity's pace. Smoke drift keeps midges from offering their editorial suggestions. There is a short debate about a proverb, whether it applies to cows as well as to men. The proverb offers itself equally to both, and so the circle declares the matter settled with a vote no one remembers taking. A woman tells the shape of a dream she had during last winter's coughing nights, about sweeping snow indoors to make the floor quiet, which worked unhelpfully. People nod because dreams are simply stories the body tells itself when there is too much story left at bedtime. Across from you, a knife point shaves a sliver from a stick, and the sliver curls like butter. The person shaving is not whittling anything in particular, only releasing curls into a pocket to become tomorrow's fire start. He speaks about nothing while his hands make something, which is a respectable arrangement. Someone else recounts the year the eel pots walked away on their own legs, an event later explained by a freshet and loose knots, though the walking story remains better countryside. A riddle tries to begin, and then thinks better of it. The night is too kind for riddles. Answers would have to put on shoes. Instead, there is a recitation of roof repairs along the lane, who finally admitted the ridge was tired, who borrowed a ladder, who promised to return it, and did, eventually, with a new rung installed for interest. These are the epics that keep weather on your side. The wind hears itself mentioned and keeps its voice soft, which is always appreciated. You listen more than you speak. Listening is a craft identical to tending a doorway flame, a hand to shade, a breath to encourage, a willingness not to own the fire. When talk thins, it thins to silence, as gentle as wool. No one hurries to replace it. Silence is the best storyteller when the audience has already supplied the plot. The cone settles into a deeper red. The rag salutes the meadow without correction. The buckets look pleased to be unnecessary. Before you rise, you add one more small thing, the way a cook adds a pinch of something at the end, because the pot asks softly. You tell of the day hay came in under a sky that threatened everything and delivered nothing. How everyone moved a shade faster without looking fast. How the last forkful slid under cover exactly as the first raindrop changed its mind. It is not a story, only a memory shaped like one. People accept it because they were there, if not that day, a day enough like it. The circle breathes, and the night agrees to be ordinary for 1 hour more, which is as fine a miracle as any. You stand at the rim where the hill forgets to be a hill and becomes a thought about distance. Beyond the hedges, the pasture flattens, and past the pasture, the world thins to a pale seam. That seam is the sea doing its best impression of a horizon someone ironed. Even in the dark it persists, a lighter stripe that will not be persuaded by hedge banks or fires. You taste it before you see it. Salt on the teeth, a cool edge in the nose, hair quietly tidied by damp air. You let your eyes rest where sky and water pretend not to share a border. The bonfire's glow strokes your cheekbone, warm on one side, sea on the other, an arrangement that keeps both from becoming arrogant. The wind keeps coming from that pale stripe, well behaved, smelling of weed and rope and a rumor of pitch. Somewhere out there a plank creaks like a careful door, but sound arrives trimmed thin. Distance edits generously. You listen for tide in the brook. It runs below the meadow in a shallow furrow, all small stones and small opinions. Tonight its voice answers the sea's long breath with a quiet yes. When the tide is high, the brook puts on weight and speaks with authority. When low, it scampers. Now it sounds like someone carrying a bowl 2/3 full, steady and a little proud. You nod as if it needs encouragement. It does not. The rag on the stake reports from its post. Still meadoward, still a model citizen. You follow its line toward a gap where animals have made their decisions for years. Beyond, the field rolls to the last rise, then gives up and lets the sea handle the rest. A faint truss of cloud lies above the water like a net forgotten on a beam. The moon, underemployed, drifts behind it and pretends to be busy. You catalog the horizon with your nose as much as your eyes. Nets that kept their opinions in the loft will share them tomorrow when fingers itch for work. A board at some small landing still remembers tar and refuses to forget. The pasture adds its paragraph. Dung with a respectable history. Crushed clover, a sweetness that leaves as soon as you notice it. Between all of it, smoke from your cone stretches thin, and then agrees to drift where it is asked. The fire behind adjusts its shoulders. You can tell by sound when oak decides to be ember, and when gorse remembers it is a show-off. The cone breathes like someone settling into a chair after declaring they would stand. You do not turn. Watching too closely teaches a thing to perform. Instead, you watch the seam and let it say what it wants. Boats exist even when you cannot see them. Gulls sleep with one eye. The sea does not mind villages, but does not consult them either. Down by the hedge bank, two figures trade places at the windward watch, stamping their feet in the rhythm people stamp when pretending not to be cold. You raise a hand, the kind of wave that is more inventory than greeting. One answers with the same economy. A spark floats out, considers pasture, and dies mid-thought. You praise the air for its housekeeping, and put your hand back into your sleeve. You think about the tide only enough to keep from thinking about it too much. High water pushes the brine smell farther inland, and smooths sound, until it is all one large breath. Low water sharpens everything, and shows stones you forgot were there. Tonight is neither boast nor scarcity. You imagine the flat back of the bay showing a gloss just visible from a church roof. If a person were high enough and foolish enough to leave warmth, someone near you says the word west as if it were an opinion. You agree, because arguing compass points with the sea is a waste of politeness. In truth, the wind has a little south folded into it, a wedge of softness that keeps smoke low but friendly. Your cheek and ear find the seam between warm and cool and take turns being in charge. You lean a breath toward the sea and back, like testing a door you already know opens. A quiet superstition wanders the ring and finds you at the rim. That salt clears lungs. That looking long at water keeps eyes from growing lazy. That the sea can take a grievance if offered politely. You do not practice these. You also do not contradict them. Instead, you loosen your collar tie by one knot and let the air remind you you are a creature built for drafts as well as blankets. Your skin votes for the fire. Your head votes for the pale seam. Democracy prevails. You stay exactly where you are. From the cottages behind comes the soft clack of a shutter encouraged shut. A small door opens and then reconsiders. A dog in the lane arranges itself into a circle and proves round sleep is warmer than discourse. Farther down the slope, cattle lift heads and lower them again. Having decided night will not change anything important, you eavesdrop on the village and it eavesdrops on you. The sea keeps its steady line. You pick up a small stone because hands like tasks when eyes are far away. The stone holds the day's stored heat on one side and the night's cold on the other. You roll it between fingers until both sides agree to be moderate. You set it on a tuft of grass that remembers hooves. A beetle, having not yet read the schedule, climbs onto your boot and discovers leather is not edible. It leaves you with the offended dignity beetles excel at. Someone steps beside you, says nothing, and shares the view like two people holding opposite handles of the same bucket. You point with your chin to the faint lighter band. There, you say, as if you have found a useful noun. They nod. For a while you discuss the sea by not discussing it. Then they return to the ring, and you continue to guard a horizon that has never required a guard, and seems to enjoy the attention anyway. A cooler ribbon of air slips over the meadow, like someone dragging a sleeve across a table. The rag leans harder. The cone answers with a longer exhale. You adjust nothing, because nothing asks you to. Your role is witness and occasional broom. The music, sensing the same change, turns its tune half a finger lower, and the new pitch fits the air like straw fits a mattress. Not soft, not hard, exactly supportive. You think of the brook finding the sea by the easiest line, and of smoke finding the meadow by the same habit, and of people finding each other around a fire, whenever fields stop being urgent. The pale seam makes you patient. It keeps your eyes far so your hands can do close work without wishing for applause. The village becomes a braid, warmth and salt and breath laid over and under until nothing frays. When your cheeks have heard enough honesty from the wind, you tuck your chin into your collar and turn your body a quarter, bringing more of the fire to the vote. The horizon stays where it was, doing its job. You give it one last look, the way you look at a sleeping child before closing a door, certain of nothing except shared air. Then you walk back to the ring, grass resigning under your soles, and the sea continuing without your comment. You watch the hay carts the way a cat watches a crowded shelf. Nothing should fall. Nothing should even think about it. 2 wagons wait downwind, wheels chalked with stones that know humility. The wisest hay sits under a wet sheet. The more ambitious bales wear only dew and confidence. You take the green broom you left to soak and stand where sparks occasionally forget their manners. The fire tosses a bright thought into the air, then another. Most fade before they learn to travel. A few try the breeze and drift toward straw as if remembering harvest. You meet them halfway with a soft, wet slap leaves against light. The sound is small and satisfying, a syllable that means not tonight. The broom's weight steadies your wrist. Drops fall to your boots and make dark moons on leather. 2 men mind the carts with the serene terror of people assigned to nothing happening. One adjusts a hitch that does not require adjustment. The other tightens a rope that was brave enough already. You ask them to roll each wagon a pace farther and to angle the tongues downhill. They do, relieved to have done something sensible. The wheels murmur against the grass like a mill considering duty. A gust leans across the meadow. The rag dips, then remembers itself. You take 2 steps windward because sparks love surprise. A bright flake lands on your sleeve and goes out as if ashamed of ambition. Another lands on the broom's wet leaves and becomes nothing at once. You praise the plain tools that keep stories short. You keep your eye on the glimmer trail the little path sparks draw when they travel farther than good behavior. When it aims at rope, you spoil it with a quick pat. When it points at hay, you make rain with your hand. The carts begin to smell faintly of warm grass, and you catalog what is harmless and what is not. Steam is fine. Smoke is interesting. Anything that crackles is your business. A boy volunteers to be your shadow. You give him the smaller broom and the vast honor of watching the underside of each axle, where dry trash likes to gather. He takes the post with the gravity of a bell ringer. Twice he finds a smiling ember in chaff and ends its career with a dignified squish. He pretends no pride and receives the correct amount anyway. Between watches, you have the carts walked a slow circle to break any notion of standing downwind like targets. Circling a little makes the air forget ideas. The drivers lead willing horses, leather creaks. A harness jingles like metal tired of sleeping. The wagons settle again with their rumps to the hedge and their faces to the pasture. Animals among animals. When the fire's shoulder lowers and the draft evens, you move the carts another pace back and pile 3 damp sacks on the near wheels. To teach sparks, there is nothing to invent. You smooth your broom leaves once on your boot, wring water, and hang the branch on a stake to drip. The hay leans, listens, and returns to smelling like fields stored for later. You nod to the men, and they nod to you. Work seen is lighter. You walk the line once more and find nothing, which is the nicest find of all. You and 2 others return to the well because the buckets have learned thirst. The rope has its regular winter squeak. The pulley's iron breathe sounds like a small bell remembering its school days. You tie the hauling line to the bucket's ear and lower until the rope slackens into the water's soft opinion. Cold fog climbs the stone throat and kisses your face as if the well owns the night. You lean your weight and the bucket comes up full. Water heavy, quiet, no splash. Splashes are for daylight. The well's lip is worn to a shine where generations have argued with gravity and won by patience. You ease the pail onto the curb, skim a few drowned midges with a sliver of thin wood, and stir in a scoop of sand until the surface goes from mirror to thought. A girl braces your hip with hers and takes the carrying yoke. She likes its arithmetic. 2 buckets balance better than 1 burden. You lift the second and hang it on the other hook. Together you walk the lane to the ring, steps matched without rehearsal. The slosh finds your rhythm and stops issuing opinions. At the circle she kneels and tips just enough into the waiting tubs, then returns for more without asking. The night promotes silently. At the crank, a man trades you places. His hands smell of rope and soap root. He hauls steady, not heroic, the way bread rises. Between lifts, you rub the pulley's pin with tallow so the squeak turns into a whisper. Someone brings a new coil of line, and you splice it to the old with a short braid that has pulled more weight than many sermons. The knot claims no beauty, only obedience. The well tastes of iron and leaf. You drink from cupped hands, and the water enters with the shiver of good counsel. Far above, the fire glows like a coin laid on dark cloth. You think of how many small trades keep a night upright. A rope traded for a quieter rope. A squeak paid with fat. A cold palm paid with heat later. Work negotiates. The village stays solvent. A boy leans too far over, and you catch the back of his belt. He looks at you with embarrassment arranged as debate, and you turn him toward the yoke without remark. He finds the rhythm the girl already has, and soon the path between well and ring becomes a calm road. Shadows blink along hedges. The buckets arrive. Mouths open, then order themselves along the rim like round sentries assigned to not much. Before you leave, you lower one last pail and let it rest in the cold. The rope hums an easy note. You tie the free end to the post so the next hand will find it without hunting. The stone curb says nothing. It has seen more careful nights than good stories. You wipe your palms on your trousers, accept the sting of cold as a gentleman, and walk back to the fire with the quiet pride of people who prefer their water plain and ready. You sit at the cone's lee and pull a small rake of hazel toward you 3 times, more idea than tool. Coals have gathered into bright villages and dark fields. Your job is to make a map where the villages share roads but do not riot. You draw a channel of ash over the liveliest part until it glows modestly, then leave 2 gaps like doors for breath. Fire hates scolding. It loves being given something reasonable to do. Above, the ribs settle with the wooden sounds of things agreeing to be simpler. You listen for bragging sharp pops, rushes that want to be theater and gently contradict them with a thin veil of gray. A flat of green boughs along the rim makes smoke find its patience. You push one glowing log toward the center, invite another to the edge where it will cool into usefulness. Embers shift as if annoyed, and then admit you were right. Someone brings a clay pan half full of sifted ash from last winter, the polite kind without lumps. You take a handful and snow it across a 2-bolt corner. The glow dims to a ruby that looks civil. The heat that rises is wider, kinder, exact for shins and hands, and not given to surprises. The ring tilts in closer, relieved of the need to negotiate. Banking is the craft of promising tomorrow a fire, and promising tonight a bed. You make a pillow of ash in the center well, and feed it 2 short sticks, not enough to wake it, enough to keep it breathing. The doorway hushes. The draft slows from talk to murmur. You lay a few heavier lengths crosswise, leaving pockets where air will remember to walk once you are no longer advising it. A woman asks whether to add 2 gorse bundles. You say 1, broken small, laid like punctuation along the rim. She does it, and the cone thanks her with a sensible sparkle that rises and retires. A boy arrives with a pine knot he found by the hedge bank. You accept it for morning. Knots belong to dawn, when smoke is a friend to midges and a tutor for appetites. You sit back and watch heat map the grass in faint silver. The musicians play a thinner tune, fit for dreaming but compatible with walking. The rag salutes the meadow. The buckets keep their dark coins along the ground. You reduce a bright pocket that would have bragged later, then stop touching anything at all. Banking is mostly stopping while thinking about starting. When you rise, the cone looks older and steadier, as if it had decided to be a hearth. The red will last. The wood is arranged to forget haste. Ash holds the secret it always holds, that sleep too needs a blanket. You dust your hands and feel warmth in your palms like 2 quiet animals. The night lengthens by a piece. The work required shrinks to listening. You take out your glove with the split seam and set it on your knee like a politely misbehaving child. The light is more than enough for needlework. Flames write their long orange alphabet along leather. You thread a boar bristle with a strip of waxed linen and warm the bristle in your mouth until it gives up its stiffness and agrees to be a needle. It is a small boast to mend at night. The boast harms no one. Beside you, another pair of hands darns a sock with a wooden egg slipped inside to fake a heel. The needle travels in tidy diagonals, weaving new road over the pothole of wear. Someone else coaxes a stubborn buckle to rejoin its strap with a new slit that respects age. Mending makes a circle out of stray patience. You contribute a few inches, and the circle thanks you by existing. You pinch the torn edge of the glove, prick holes with an awl the size of a modest thorn, and pull the linen through in neat crosses. The seam it makes will be less handsome than the original, which is fine. Hands prefer strength to beauty where rope is concerned. You rub tallow over the finished run, and the stitches lie down, satisfied. A nick on your knuckle earns a dot of salt from the same pouch used for batter. Salt mines, more than one trade. Someone pages through a little kit. Needles napped in wool, a twist of sinew, 2 buttons that refuse to match anything, and therefore will match something eventually. A girl takes pride in relacing her shoe with a cord twin tighter than memory. She spits on the knot and presses it as if to baptize its future. The fire approves by doing nothing unusual. Conversation during mending uses the small voice, perfect for things that do not need fixing. A cousin's habit of counting stairs aloud. How the mayor dislikes men who hum, whether the buckwheat in the North Strip looks ambitious. No one offers advice because no one has requested any. The ground warms your ankles. The cone's doorway pulses like a patient heart. Not your business for this quarter hour. You finish the glove and try it on. The seam rides smooth. The thumb no longer dreams of escape. You hold your hands toward the heat, and the new stitches shine a little as if proud to be noticed once before being forgotten forever. You put away the bristle and all, fold the kit, and feel that certain tranquility of small things made willing to last. The night is happier by the thickness of a thread. A woman returns with the ash dish you hid earlier. She has dressed its rim with 3 short scratches, the quiet alphabet of habit. She offers a fingertip to the dish and draws a neat cross on her sleeve where last year's smear has faded. No sermon attends. It is a farmer's geometry. Mark, remember, go on. Around the ring, others do the same, some on cloth, some on skin. One on a bucket's ear, as if the bucket should share in staying lucky. You accept the dish and make a thumbprint at the inside of your wrist. Small enough to forget, large enough to find by chance tomorrow. The ash is cool, almost silky, the color of dusk folded into work. It leaves no perfume, only the memory of fireplace and field. A man who does not bother with crosses taps the dish twice. A code between him and practicality. That counts too. The dish travels with the same economy as bread. Not offered loudly, not refused rudely. At the cone's base, someone pinches ash into the doorway, and the glow answers with a modest blessing of red. A child dots her friend's nose and then erases it with a sleeve, embarrassed by her own cleverness. Mothers correct with smiles that never quite become smiles. The night keeps a straight face and enjoys everyone. You think of what ash does when the hour grows thin. Sweetens soil, tenderizes stubborn beans, polishes a scalded pot, dries a damp boot, draws the bite from nettle rash. Tonight, it also lends people the feeling that tomorrow has already started and will likely continue. Superstition and usefulness shake hands without remembering who offered first. At your elbow, a neighbor traces a small fish on her apron, quick as a sparrow. She says nothing, but later in the year you will remember and she will not, which is fair. Another smudges the lintel of the cider pot, then wipes it clean, because blessings should not sour drink. The bucket woman refuses the dish with a shake of her head, and then accepts it anyway, because refusing a blessing is like refusing a towel principled in chili. When the dish completes its quiet circuit, it returns to the shadow under the bucket's lip, where it enjoys obscurity. You brush your wrist where the ash rests, and feel nothing except the idea of being accompanied by something both light and older than anyone present. The cone breathes evenly. The rag minding the meadow keeps its posture. You place your hands on your knees and let the village be slightly more itself than it was 5 minutes ago. The ember lane has thinned into a polite striped warm light set into earth, like a careful seam. 2 older boys itch to cross it. Without becoming a sermon, you set a rhythm for them. Wait for the breeze to rest. Find a spot where glow is thought, not argument. Lift knees like you respect your shins. You stand upwind with the broom, not to scold, only to erase exaggerations. The first boy tests with the back of his hand a span above the stripe. He nods at the temperature and looks more serious than his age permits. He steps 1, 2 over the seam, neither showy nor timid. His heel scuffs ash on landing. You pat it flat with the broom and the world continues. The second boy copies with a softer foot and earns the quiet pride of his mother's mouth. A girl watches and decides the better trick is smaller. She walks beside the stripe heel to toe, practicing balance where heat judges nothing. You praise her choice aloud so the boys hear a different currency. She beams at the ground. The ember lane approves by refusing to brighten. You let 3 more cross, because 3 is the right number before luck grows bored. Between each you rake a thin spoonful of cooler ash across the place where feet will pass. The stripe sighs. The breeze tastes the meadow and stays civil. A spark lifts, rethinks travel, and becomes memory a yard away. You feel unnecessary in the best way. Someone suggests you try, which is how adults are lured. You do, making the same small steps you advised. No extra flourish because dignity is a poor insulator. Heat licks your ankles and moves on. You nod, as if complimented by a sensible host. When you turn back, a grandmother in a shawl, the color of stormwater, crosses with such economy that the boys clap before remembering they did not plan to. Afterward, you scatter the lane thinner with the flat of your shovel and return embers to the cone's lip, where they learn to be useful again. Children rub soles on damp dirt and admire the tidy half-moons they print. The bucket woman pours a whisper of sand water where someone grew overconfident, changing bright to damp with a single, instructive hush. The ring resumes its slow migration near the music, satisfied that a small desire has been answered without inventing a legend for tomorrow. You cut short brands from the cone's polite fringe, each no longer than your forearm, and only as lively as a cat dozing. The ends blacken with that handsome shine charcoal wears when it has remembered restraint. A basket waits lined with sand to carry them from fire to doorways without incident. Dawn will ask for flame at many small addresses. You are writing the invitations now. At the brazier, you rekindle the best of them, letting each tip take a small bite of coal until a red kernel appears. Then you pull the brand back to cool its arrogance, rolling it once across damp earth so the ember stays where it should. You mark each stick with a notch of your knife, 1 for your house, 2 for the widow at the bend, 3 for the cottage with the door that sticks. The marks feel like truth, small and sharp and remembered in the fingers. Neighbors arrive one by one and choose without theater. Each tests a tip under the bucket woman's eye, blowing sideways so the ember brightens but never shows off. A man wraps his in a fold of green leaf and tucks it into a clay tube meant for this work. He nods to the pot as if thanking the village itself. A girl asks for a thin sliver for the bread oven. You shave one from a thicker brand so her small hearth will not learn bad manners. The brazier's coal performs its generous arithmetic. Light given does not subtract. You keep the lid half ajar and the vents in line. The pot hums a contented vowel. Now and then you rake a shy ember back from a brand that thought wandering was allowed. You tell it no with a short breath and it agrees. When your own turn comes, you choose a brand with grain that looks honest and weight that will please your hearthstone. You test the glow, teach it to rest by rolling once in ash, and lay it across the mouth of a clay jar you brought empty on purpose. The jar swallows the tip like a tame fox holding a candle. You stop to watch one more neighbor walk away, cradling a small future. It feels like the end of a service with no beginning and no end, only usefulness in a circle. You set the basket near the buckets for any latecomer and leave 2 fresh sticks in the brazier's keeping. Dawn sometimes forgets to warn. The cone lowers its shoulders and accepts your theft as pruning, not insult. Around the ring, people hold their little brands with the gravity of letters from someone patient. You breathe, knowing your own hearth will wake on the first try, and sigh like a house that recognizes itself. The night thins the way broth does when everyone has had a turn. Conversations lower, steps slow. The music chooses tunes that walk a lane nobody sees. You stand with your hands open to the heat and let the air do arithmetic on your face. Warm, cool, until your eyelids accept the equation. Owls trade remarks from the hedges. A fox posts a brief opinion and is not heard from again. The brook deepens its voice by a spoonful. Above, the cone's doorway is a patient mouth, exhaling without needing listeners. Someone near the rim yawns and then pretends it was a cough. The bucket woman tightens one lid and loosens another by reflex. Vigilance has its own sleep. You count small inventories because counting calms. 2 knots in your left cuff, 1 scratch on the broom handle, 4 damp crescents on your boots from stones. Across the fire, the old man with wrists of rope has folded his head briefly on his forearms. No one interprets it. The piper holds a single drone, as if to teach breath how to wander without getting lost. The bombarde belongs to its lap. You step to the meadow's edge and listen for what you would miss if you left too early. The distant cartwheel that finds the same rut every night, the minute ping of sap correcting itself inside a rib, the sigh a shawl makes when a shoulder stops arguing. You store those like kindling, light and ready. When you return, the ring has loosened into commas and dashes, clusters of quiet with little roads between. You take a road and end at a warm stone and sit without asking anyone for permission. Sleep is not the plan. It visits anyway, lightly, a hand over your eyes for 3 heartbeats. You wake to your own breath, agreeing with the fires. The night grows thin, but not brittle. You hold your brand and wait for the kind of tired that arrives with chores already imagined, and therefore easier. Dawn starts by trying not to be noticed. The east lifts one shade lighter, like a lid shifting without deciding to open. You feel it on your neck before your eyes volunteer. The rag on its stake gives a little bow. The wind pretends to be new. You stand and your knees vote nay, then accept the motion. The cone has become a red bowl, quiet and sincere. You take up the rake and draw the embers into a smaller, brighter island, teaching the heat to concentrate for the last hour. A neighbor lays 2 flat stones near it for the day's first hands to warm, and for the last small round of batter that refuses to admit it has gone to sleep. The cider pot yields a final cup that tastes of loft and apple peel. Faces reappear from shawls with the expressions of people who know morning tricks. Kindness first, speech later. To the north, roofs separate from sky, straw shows its comb lines. The sea's seam thickens into something argument. Proof. Birds discover their voices one at a time so as not to startle the air. You walk the bucket line, pouring out what would turn stale, returning sand to sacks, tipping each pail to dry with its mouth open to light. Tools go to their appointed corners, brooms to stakes, shovels to the hedge bank, the rake under your arm until the last sweep. The brazier gets its lid placed square. The coal inside, half asleep, will become your breakfast if treated kindly. A woman lifts her brand from the sand-lined basket and holds it like a loaf. She nods to you with the exact politeness reserved for neighbors who help the night remember itself. Others collect theirs, tuck them into clay throats, tie cloth around mouths to carry a small fire home without fuss. The cone gives up a slow breath, and you praise it silently for its restraint. Dawn steps further into its job. The ring thins to a line, then to paths. You look once at the red bowl and memorize it useful, unromantic, perfect for today. The tune ends without pretending to have begun. You take your broom and make one last soft stroke across the ground, trimming the night into morning sighs. You carry a shallow pan of ash like a plate of snow that forgot cold. The kitchen plots wake pale in the weak light beds edged with stone. Little fences practicing loyalty. Soil ready to take instructions. You sift a light dressing across the cabbage row where slugs like to practice their letters. Then, around the bean bed where last year's pods told stories in wind. Ash falls in a soft gray rain. It will sweeten the ground and make certain chewings less enthusiastic. You do not lecture the earth. You make suggestions. A boy follows with a short hoe and draws the ash into the top skin like brushing crumbs into a tablecloth fold. He asks if plants enjoy breakfast, and you say yes, provided it is not boastful. At the herb corner, your stingy too much kindness turns bossy. A shake for thyme, a pinch for sage, a thought for the stubborn patch that refuses to confess whether it is nettle or ambition. You mark the bed ends with 2 stones gone warm from the night. Not for magic, only because warm hands prefer warm things, and that begins the day gently. A neighbor does the same at her fence line, dusting the path hen's favor. The birds approve or do not. Hens keep their own calendars. At the doorstep, you scatter a little where boots collect damp. It dries a scrape on your knuckle and whitens it into insignificance. You rub the rest into your palms, and the skin loses the memory of rope. When the pan is light, you tap it twice, and the last little cloud makes a ribbon along the bean poles. The air smells of yesterday's fire and this morning's dirt, a correct mixture. The cone on the common sits low and useful. You set the pan by the door, where rain will not interview it. The soil looks back as if amused. You look back as if you meant it. The day, briefly, is symmetrical. The board that held last night's circles holds this morning's remainders triangles, folded and wrapped in cloth that smells faintly of smoke and salt. You warm 2 on a flat stone kissed by an ember, and pass them to whoever's hand arrives without a plan. Cheese has settled, butter has married the crumb, and the edges crisp again. New manners on old bread. A heel of rye appears from someone's pocket, a scrap of apple from the pot, a spoon's worth of curd that escaped notice. Breakfast is assembly, not invention. People eat standing, because standing feels like purpose. They chew with that pleasurable concentration reserved for food that asked to be carried before it offered to be eaten. You take a triangle for yourself and walk to the hedge bank where the view pretends to be grand, but is only exact meadow, brook, roofs, seam of sea. The galette tastes of field and patience. It argues for a second piece with quiet logic. You obey. The cider you saved has turned honest and flat. You drink it anyway, a memory you can swallow. Someone passes salt, as if passing a sentence. Someone else scrapes a warm stone clean with the spine of a knife, and polishes it with grass for the next mouth. The musicians take their share, and remember that reeds and bread occupy similar corners of comfort. The bucket woman eats last and best, leaning one hip on her favorite pail, as if it were a stool carved for her name. Children become suddenly tall, on morsels and plans. A boy invents a profession of crumb catcher and does well. A girl trades half her piece for a story about the ox with the nicked horn, and gets both halves back, plus the story, because the teller is not stingy. You finish, wipe your finger on your sleeve, and feel that mild, entire satisfaction that belongs to warm food and cool air. Good, says your mouth. Good, says the morning. Leave-taking here is mostly nods arranged in the right order. You begin with the people who stood upwind with you. Their faces carry the same ash freckles your sleeve does. A chin lifts. Another chin returns the gesture. Everyone understands the book is closed but left on the table. Hands touch once, briefly. Not to confirm names, but to confirm warmth. The musicians pack with the tidy melancholy of craftsmen who know where each part sleeps. The piper wipes leather and whispers a promise to oil later. The bombarde's reed returns to its little wool pocket like a bird to a hedge. They nod toward the cone and toward you. Equal courtesies. You answer with the smallest bow your neck can manage. The bucket woman sets each pail upside down on its rim to dry, like a row of hats after rain. You offer to carry one, and she declines, which is her way of saying thank you. She takes your broom and hangs it on her arm, and that is her other way. You both look at the rag, which still points meadowward, and feel a foolish pride in weather that needed no correction. Neighbors drift down lanes the way smoke drifted to the pasture without urgency, with purpose. Two men roll the hay carts out of the common, as if escorting dignitaries. A child lingers, and then sudden remembers a shoe. You hold it while she puts it on without drama. The old man with rope wrists waves the exact amount, and turns downhill to the brook's path. You save the last nod for the cone itself, which has done its work without boasting. The red cord dims under its ash blanket. A single spark travels 3 inches and retires with grace. You pick up your brand and feel its willing warmth. You tuck it in the clay throat, tie the cloth over, and lift the jar by its ears. The weight is agreeable. The day will agree with it. Home finds you by the way. Your feet recognize the lane in the new light. Your door lintel has kept its bargain with gravity. Inside, the hearth is honest but a sleep ash pillow. 3 old cherries pretending to be coal. Yesterday's blackened rib leaning like a tired shoulder. You kneel and clear the little bed, leaving a shallow hollow where breath can learn to move. You ease the brand from its clay throat. Its tip glows like a secret, willing to speak if addressed kindly. You lay it in the hollow and feed it crumbs of yesterday's kindling shavings that remember your knife. Splinters saved for so long they think they are important. You cup your hands and breathe from the side, the quiet way. The ember considers and then nods. Flame appears the size of a bean and grows to the size of a word. You set 2 thin sticks across like bridge and traveler. Smoke climbs the flue with the relief of someone who has found their hat. You add 1 proper piece and no more, because boasting breaks mornings. Heat moves into your forefingers and then your wrists. The house recognizes itself and says so in creaks you admire. On the hook, you hang the kettle. In the pan, you lay a circle of yesterday's batter for whoever wakes next. The room asks for less cold and receives it. You rub ash from your sleeve onto the hearthstone as if signing your name, and then wipe the mark away because names are for markets, not for kitchens at dawn. You sit back on your heels and listen for the village through walls. The far dog deciding not to comment. A cart taking the cautious rut. A neighbor's doorbar speaking and then being quiet. Your brand dwindles to a red thought and then becomes part of the house forever. You press your hands together over the new heat and set your face soft. There is nothing to hurry. Today has already begun by agreeing to yesterday. The house holds its small weather, and you let your eyelids follow the old line of the rafters, while the hearth learns to breathe without advice. Outside, the lane becomes the sensible color of morning no drama, only enough light to tell stone from shadow. You rest your palms to the warm lip of the hearth and keep still until warmth travels up your forearms the way a thought travels when it is not trying to be clever. In the yard, a gate clicks once and chooses quiet. The brook carries a silver thread under the hedge and does not ask to be noticed. Somewhere, ash on a doorstep dries into a pale memory, and a cabbage leaf convinces a slug to be polite. The brand's rind sinks into powder, and the kettle considers a first polite blur of steam. Breath settles. In through the nose, out through the mouth, easy even. The width of a slow step on the common. You allow the village to happen without you. A cart slices the same rut it sliced last week, predictably. A hen complains and then remembers an egg. The sea takes its seam and sews it to the sky exactly where it did yesterday. The room accepts a little light on the table, and your hands accept the simple business of heating themselves without purpose. Heat becomes background. Background becomes sleep's favorite path. You think once of the fire on the hill now, a red bowl, under ash of the buckets upside down, of stones cooling with dignity. You think once of the brand you carried, already forgetting it as it becomes your hearth's memory instead of yours. Then you let thoughts slide to the edges, the way coals slide inward under ash. You watch nothing, and nothing is generous. The morning grows wider without asking you to move. You blink slower once, and the room answers with the quiet of a house that has decided for you. Rest, just for a little, while the kettle begins to whisper. We hope this glimpse into old customs has been a calm and pleasant one. If it made you curious for more, you can like, share, or leave a kind comment. And if you wish, subscribe to be here for the next unhurried tradition we explore together. End of script. Sweet dreams.